Welcome to the Calder Farmstead.
Now the Ice Hawks back out to center in transition. Carlson with Quinville 2-on-1. Right with Carlson, Quinville scores!
Here's a chance for Garrett. He scores! Off the face-off! Up in Zeminger. Pulled back to Werenski. Has it. Shoots one. Bounces off a man. 5 seconds left. Werenski. Another jam on the shot. Turning and firing. They go! Scores! They score! Now they catch each other. They both go right over the top. Matching rights to one another. McDermott gets the helmet off of Cassie.
And now with 9 minutes gone in overtime, the Bears breaking out right side with Bear. Looks like cutting to the net. Bear will score!
And here are your hosts, Cece and Sean.
Hello and greetings from the mile-high city of Denver, Colorado.
And Alexandria, Virginia.
Whoa, there is no place like home. Welcome to the Calder Farmstead podcast, episode number 30 for Tuesday, April 20th, 2021. If you were hoping for a podcast featuring strategy for indoor or outdoor concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs for short, we are not going to be much help. This is an American Hockey League podcast, and my name is Cece Hockley.
And I'm Sean O'Brien.
And as always, we thank you for tuning in with us.
If you're new to hearing Cece and I talk about hockey, we're going to recap some of the last weekend in the AHL for you, as well as break down a pretty important story that's going on in the AHL with a very respectable journalist. And once we get to the actual hockey on the ice, we're going to talk about what we see when we watch the film, as well as use some advanced stats to help us break it down. If that's new to you, you may want to head over to our podcast feed or YouTube channel, wherever you're listening to us from, and check out episode 0. It's a short primer on some of the stats we're going to talk about, as well as how we view what's important on the ice. So if you're newer to some of the more advanced hockey stats terms like PDO or the point shares model, or newer hockey terms like controlled zone entries, go check it out, so you better be able to pick up what we're putting down. I promise it's not that nerdy or technical. It's only 20 minutes. And let's be honest, you wasted 20 minutes today Googling, who is Jake Paul and will I be his next opponent? So why not spend a little more time with us talking hockey?
All right. So normally we dive into the weekend that was on the ice with a series recap, but my goodness, I go to Indy to cover an ECHL game. And of course, whenever I go out of town to cover a game, big news has to break. It's how it works. It's how it's always worked with me, whether I've been with the Sin Bin, whether I've been with Full Press Hockey. And why is the Calder Farmstead no different? So Friday the 16th, Nicole Menner of WBNG News, the CBS affiliate there in Binghamton, New York, she tweeted out that a patent had been filed by the Utica, or for the Utica Devils rather, by current Utica Comets president Robert Esch on April 5th. And she reached out to Broome County, who shared their statement on arena management. And they stated, being the third party in the situation, they had, quote, no further details to announce, end quote. The AHL even told Nicole when she reached out to them that, they hadn't received a request from New Jersey to move their AHL franchise. So obviously, it got all of our ears perked up, and it's like, what is going on there in New York? So the very next day, it came out that New Jersey, the Devils organization, informed Binghamton Devils Executive Vice President of Operations, Tom Mitchell, that on Wednesday, April 14th, the AHL team would be relocating. Mitchell said, quote, "This is devastating news to us, to the community. The demands the New Jersey Devils were putting on us were absolutely impossible, and we just couldn't comply with them. So it looks like we're going to part ways and just try to move on." And he did not elaborate on what those requirements that the New Jersey Devils rather, laid upon him. So with all that said, Sean had a great idea. He's like, why don't we bring Nicole onto the show to talk about this? And, she spent time working for the New England Sports Network and anchoring sports in Little Rock, Arkansas, before coming on board the previously mentioned WBNG as sports anchor in February 2019. So we want to welcome to the show, Nicole Menner. Nicole, thanks for taking time out to join us.
Thank you guys for having me. It's funny you mentioned that you feel like news always breaks, when you're away. And I feel like news always breaks on a Friday, late afternoon, right before the 6:00 show happens. That's usually how it goes.
And you were the one to break it this time. So, or at least, Yeah. So
Yes.
at least you were a part of it this time. But yeah, Sean, you want to start off with questions for Nicole? Go right ahead, bud.
Yeah, I mean, hindsight is 2020, a phrase that certainly hits a little differently than it used to. But looking back, even before this season, was there any indication that New Jersey was unhappy with how Binghamton was running the show prior to this year? Or does it seem like the events of this season were the root cause, or a little column A, little column B?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, no, there were no issues. The contract was set for 5 years, so it was supposed to run from or until the 2021-22 season. And as far as I knew, and I had never heard that there was any, any issues that New Jersey had with the facilities here or anything. I think that once it was announced that the B Devils would be playing in Newark this season, naturally, and this is just based on what I heard from viewers and everything, not what I heard from arena management or anything like that, but from viewers, everyone's head started to spin. Obviously, my mind went there too. It's like, okay, well, that's interesting because they could play here this season, but they're choosing not to. And again, they listed reasons for that. But yeah, I mean, I think everyone had some questions when that news came out. But when I talked to VP of Ops, Tom Mitchell, he really seemed like he was blindsided by it this past week. And there was no prior indication from New Jersey that they wanted to move the AHL team.
Yeah, and it definitely, I mean, I remember when they decided they were going to announce from Newark, and people definitely had those thoughts too. And then you looked around the AHL and it's like, well, they're not alone in kind of relocating for what is going to be just a chaotic year. I mean, Stockton went all the way to Calgary. Providence is playing at a Marlborough. So while, yes, it was definitely a kind of surprise move, it at least felt from my end genuine, in that it wasn't like this is step one of a 3-step conversation of us leaving. But it sounds to me like, from reading your coverage and hearing from fans, that the general dispute here kind of comes down to this. Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment, who owns both the Devils hockey teams but leases the management of the franchise to the group in Binghamton, wanted the group to run the team in a way that the Binghamton management felt was untenable. HBSC is deciding to go find someone, apparently Utica, who's going to run the show to their liking. Now, how untenable those demands were is probably something we're never going to hear in a public forum, and that's just kind of the way that these stories break. But that seems to be the core of how we got here. One side saying, like, we want you to do this, and the other side saying, we can't do that, and them deciding to part ways based on it. Would you say that that's a fair assessment, or is there some context that I'm missing here?
No, I mean, I think that's pretty much it. And as far as what I've been told and what I reported on Friday and Saturday, the B Devils ownership group and New Jersey Devils had a dispute going on. Obviously, it's not clear what exactly that dispute was, but as we heard Mitchell say, they were making demands that he called impossible to fulfill, and he wouldn't get into the details of those. Obviously, everyone can speculate about what those demands are. But yeah, I mean, as far as I know, there was a dispute between the two sides, and that ultimately led to New Jersey telling them that they were going to relocate.
Yeah, and there has definitely been no shortage of speculation on that. Do you have any leanings of anything more than what's been out there so far, or is this all just we're throwing darts in the dark here like you are?
Yeah, if I were to say, it would be pure speculation. I truly have not been given any indication of what the demands were. I think people probably usually their mind would go to facility upgrades. I think that's the obvious one that most teams probably want their AHL clubs to make, or the arenas they're playing in to make. I haven't been told that. Again, pure speculation, but typically I feel like that's what the demands would have to do with. But I mean, the arena, it's a nice facility, and it's been home to professional hockey here in Binghamton for a really long time. So, I mean, yeah, it's unclear what those demands were, but he called them ridiculous. He called them absolutely impossible. So I imagine they were pretty difficult demands to meet.
Yeah. And, it's like, it's a completely different situation than, say, the Stockton Heat and the Calgary Flames. The riding out west, since I'm here in Denver, get a little bit more of a finger on the pulse of that situation. And, rumblings of Calgary wanting to move Stockton to Colorado Springs a year and a half ago. And, and of course, Calgary bringing the Stockton Heat, up to Canada for the season. Obviously that of course adds fuel to the fire and doesn't bode well. But this situation, like you said, Nicole, it just seems to have come and blindsided a lot of parties involved. And so, the $64,000 question here, is this the end of AHL hockey in Binghamton for right now? I know that obviously with the Utica Comets looking to possibly rebrand with that patent that you reported on Friday from April 5th. And, this Binghamton franchise and Vancouver, probably rumblings of them looking to move a franchise out west, if not to British Columbia there in Canada. Are there any rumors, whispers, or rays of hope that another team can fill the void in time for the 2021-22 season or even beyond that, Nicole?
Yeah, I mean, right now, as Mitchell told me, and as I've been hearing, it's just too soon to tell, but everyone seems really optimistic about it because when I interviewed Mitchell, he was talking, and this is what everyone says when we talk about hockey in Binghamton. One, Binghamton is absolutely a hockey city, hands down. People here love their hockey. We've had professional hockey here for, I guess, close to 50 years now. And I think the only time we haven't had an AHL team in recent years, not even recent, it was like the late 90s to early 2000s before the B-Sens came here. So it's been a long time since we haven't had AHL hockey. They seem pretty optimistic that they will be able to get some team in this fall, whether that is an AHL team or, they might have to move down to the ECHL or even some other type of professional hockey league right now. They definitely have optimism about it, and I know they're trying to explore their options. Too early to tell, but I think everyone here is very hopeful that there will be hockey in the arena building come October.
That is good because it definitely has seemed from hearing from fans that has been the biggest thing is, yes, they're upset that the Devils are leaving and, this feels all too familiar from them. But that is their hope that they can at least get to, especially as this year, they haven't gotten to see hockey. So it will be going on almost 2 years if they can't get a team in here for 21-22 that they won't get to see hockey in person. And as someone who's seen a lot of hockey in person, I can tell you it is absolutely a different experience than trying to watch it, at home on TV or on a laptop or something like that, especially for an arena that is as intimate as that one is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just been so interesting too, because I think one thing to mention is that the Utica trademark definitely seemed to take them by surprise. I think when I first heard the rumblings that the B Devils wouldn't be coming back to Binghamton, my mind definitely didn't think they'd be moving up to Utica when Binghamton's right here. So I think, and Mitchell came out and said that he also, he wasn't informed. Someone apparently informed him about that. And then that's how he learned that happened. So he definitely had no idea. It seems like blindsided is kind of the word that the B Devils management ownership here is using.
And I think that was the most interesting piece of all of this is that this all seemed to get set in motion by a patent from Robert Esch. And I think that's the most interesting part because to me, like, if you were thinking about doing like a throwback night or whatever, and you needed the patent, that was one thing. But you would think then if that was the case, he would have gone and patented a bunch of other things, like gone for patents for other things. Like, or if he was trying to maybe see if Vancouver was giving him leanings that they were going to leave, you'd be patenting other team names. But nope, as far as I can tell, it's just the one, the Utica Devils patents. So I think the most interesting part too about that very interesting part is that was on April 5th. The first leanings we had of any of this were 2 weeks ago, and they were from no one in the Devils organization, which says that there's probably a lot beneath the surface here, not just between Utica and Vancouver, but also between New Jersey and Utica. And all of it seems very much without Tom Mitchell's knowledge. Does that at least seem like your leanings from the ground, and can you add anything to it?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the impression that I was given. And then even like I reached out to the AHL, and obviously you never know when you receive response, what's true and what's not true, or, who knows what. But when I reached out to them, they said they had never received any requests from New Jersey, and they had never received any requests from Utica or Vancouver. But yeah, I mean, you see that trademark, and obviously people can put two and two together. So that was kind of the first piece of the puzzle. And it's like Utica Devils on April 5th from the current Utica Comets president. And you're reading all the things that are in that trademark. And it's just like, well, the wheels start turning and you can kind of start to figure out something's up.
Yeah, that was, I think, the most suspicious part of it is just like, oh, maybe they were doing a throwback night or whatever. Then it's like, oh, no, that's not what's happening here. And I didn't expect, like, if the AHL would have given you a full answer and been like, yep, here's all the paperwork. Like, I probably would have died of heart attack from surprise. I remember when Charlotte and Chicago did their swap last year. And it seemed like this just kind of behind closed doors go around, where Charlotte was very much in the same situation that Binghamton is right now, where they're like, we haven't heard anything about this. We learned about this from Twitter, which is not a place which you want to hear breaking news about yourself.
No.
And that was kind of like, I felt very similar parallels there, minus the patent office. But I'm surprised that it's kind of going this way, but that does seem to be the way that these deals get done.
Yeah. And again, like I reached out to New Jersey for comment, received nothing, which I didn't expect to. And then today, I believe someone in Utica said that they did get a comment from Vancouver finally. And I can't remember exactly what it said, but I know Vancouver finally commented on the whole thing. But yeah, New Jersey hasn't commented on it. I'm pretty sure Robert Esch from Utica still hasn't given a comment about it to my friends up in Utica who have been now covering this too. So definitely a lot of answers that still need to be given. And I think everyone's trying to dig for those answers right now, myself included.
And Nicole, real quick, I wanted to chime in and ask you, it kind of reminds me of the Manchester Monarchs back in the ECHL a couple seasons ago. They, after their last playoff game, after they were eliminated, like a day or two later, they announced that they were folding the team, and they did not inform the ECHL. The ECHL is like, well, this is news to us. Yeah. And it's like, that's how it happens sometimes. It's like the teams just are doing their own thing without, informing the league of what goes on behind closed doors, like Sean said. But I'm curious, Nicole, like, what did you get an anonymous tip or what led you to find that Utica had filed for this Utica Devils patent? I'm curious how you came upon this.
$1 million question.
Yes, that's the $1 million one.
I had started, I've been here in Binghamton for 2 years. I have, a lot of people I'm close with throughout the community. And I started to just kind of hear some inklings about it. And honestly, just one thing kind of led me to start doing digging, and it kind of, pointed me in the direction of maybe Utica's involved. So it was just kind of like, one thing led to another. You put the pieces together, you hear some things from some sources, or you hear tidbits from people. So my Friday was spent doing a lot of digging that morning. But honestly, it was just kind of one of those things. You stumble upon it and then you're like, okay, well, this is the concrete piece that I have that I can now move on with, and I can use this and start really asking around and taking this to people and kind of seeing if there's any answers there. But yeah, it certainly spiraled pretty fast once that went out there.
Yeah, now you're talking on an AHL podcast. I mean, this is the natural progression of things. So, Sean, did you have any final questions for Nicole?
I mean, I think we've managed to cover just about all of the concerns and the questions that I feel like reasonably Nicole can help us with here. I don't imagine you're going to have too much knowledge on Utica ticket refunds for future seasons.
No, but I do know that the B Devils sent out emails to their season ticket holders today, because I saw that on Twitter. One of the fans posted it. And I could pull it up right now because the language used, it was like, we're so sorry. We're sorry. Like, we're shocked by this. If I can find it quickly.
Yeah, and to stall here for you while you look that up, I saw the message from Vancouver between them and Utica, kind of trying to explain their side of it in the most vague terms possible. And they're just like, we're just kind of looking at our options.
Yes,
we're happy with it. Like, it was very much a
in circles.
Yeah, it was very much like what you see as a press release from celebrity couples when they're about to start seeing other people.
Yep. So the email says, to our loyal fans, to say our organization is disappointed in the news from New Jersey is an understatement. We are all deeply saddened and shocked and are currently trying to process the information to the best of our ability. They go on to say they're refunding and everything. And then at the end, it says, we hope that the AHL will be back in Binghamton in the future. So, wow. Yeah, the breakup has happened, I guess. It's official.
Yeah, it's down to just signing the paperwork, it sounds like. And I think the thing, too, is in trying to drum up, like I was looking up earlier today, like AHL contracts and affiliation agreements and like when they're ending, to see if like, is there even like a swingable dance partner here for them? And that was not a very fruitful search. I'm sorry to say, bingo fans who are listening, there definitely did not seem like a natural, I'm like, hey, this team's available. Maybe they're unhappy. This is an AHL market. Like, the only one that I could even come close to finding was Grand Rapids, and they just didn't like their extension ends next season. But like, I can't imagine a world in which the Red Wings leave Grand Rapids to go to Binghamton.
Agreed. Yeah,
I couldn't imagine a world in which the Hurricanes would leave Charlotte. So, it's not totally without precedent, but like looking for them to find a team for October, there was not an obvious answer to me, but we've seen wilder things in this league in terms of the affiliation shuffle.
Well, I think that's the confusing part too for, I don't know how it works. Like Binghamton they were supposed to be under contract for 5 years. So it would have taken them through the 21-22 season. Obviously, I know that gets into like legal things and contracts and all of that. Tom Mitchell couldn't comment about it when I asked him, but that's where it gets so hairy for me because I'm like, okay, all of these teams are under contract. Some of them don't have the opt-out. So I'm just like, how does that all work? If I don't know, that's the part that I would like to uncover a little bit.
I have at least an idea. Like this is not an insider thing at all. I clearly am not a Binghamton News insider, but at least the idea, having seen at a different level of hockey what these contracts can look like at times, is that if when they signed the contract there was something in it that said you will make these upgrades, like you will give us a better player gym, or new this, brand new that. And then we're getting to the end of that contract and we like those plans are not only not in motion, they're very clearly not happening.
Yeah,
I think the Harris Blitzer side is gonna be like, this contract's void. We don't have to do the next year because you're clearly not going to give us stuff that's in the contract. That gives us the legal ground to walk away. I would also like to take this time saying I am not a lawyer. I don't even play one on television, but that is at least something that I have seen from other leagues and other teams in the past to kind of weasel their way out of this, so to speak. So if this was an arena upgrade thing that wasn't getting done, and I mean, in the state of the league and the world right now, trying to upgrade your arena facilities at this moment in time does in fact seem kind of insane. So that at least seems like it lends, it's a puzzle piece that could fit. Not saying that's what happened. I'm not a reporter, an insider, any of that, but it does fit.
That's true. And it's actually funny because I had done a story last summer. The arena had this whole plan conducted to do a complete renovation. And it wasn't this was last summer and it was waiting to get approved. Obviously COVID hit and kind of put things on a halt, but they had, I did a full story on it. You can find it on WBNG.com if anyone's listening, but they had a full plan that they were hoping to come into fruition in sometime within the next few years. It was, I forget what the price was, but obviously it was a very, very costly project. So I guess right now that's probably, who knows where that stands now, but I know they had something drawn up. And I imagine, something, the Devils wanted something that was done by now, or at least would be by next season.
Yeah. Well, Nicole, once again, thank you for coming on. Nicole Menner of WBNG, the CBS affiliate there in Binghamton, New York. And yeah, thanks again for coming on. And gosh, if more news breaks, we may just have to welcome you back on and say, hey, give us a little update of how things are going for pro hockey in Binghamton. So how's that sound?
Thank you. I would love to come back. This was great. Hopefully we can uncover a few more things in the next few weeks.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we can count on you to do that.
Absolutely. You guys can find me,
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for taking time out of your day. Because while, our podcast is not super huge, we don't have that giant of a platform. You are a very good get for us. So I appreciate you taking the time to kind of work through this a little bit. It means a lot to us.
Of course. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. I'll send people your way, get you some more listeners.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Have a good night, Nicole. Thanks.
Bye.
Nicole Menner of WBNG, the CBS affiliate in Binghamton, New York. Once again, Sean planted the seed. I pursued, got the watering can out, and bloop, the vine grew. So
I sent that to you. What was that, like Saturday night? And I'm like, reach out to her and see if that she'll come on the show. Thinking we should definitely try. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. But I thought there was absolutely no way that would happen. But here we are.
She agreed just right out of the gate. And
that's awesome.
I said, are you available Monday night? And she goes, absolutely. I said, okay, here's the time block that we normally record. And she says, can we do 8 Eastern? I said, sure. Absolutely. We've recorded later than that with guys like Kevin Lacy.
Oh yeah. We've had we've burned the midnight oil or the 6 a.m. Sweden oil, however you want to look at it. But
absolutely.
I do believe we are overdue for a break here. We actually do have more Binghamton Devils to talk about, but we're going to get to stuff on the ice here. But first, we got to pay some bills. Even though this is, a very short trip for me this week, we do need to cover some travel expenses. So hang out through the ads, and we will be back.
Special thanks once again to Nicole Menner of KBNG, the CBS affiliate there in Binghamton, New York, for giving us the scoop after giving all of us the scoop this past Friday and Saturday about the Utica Comets putting in a patent on the Utica Devils name and the Binghamton Devils fractured relationship with the New Jersey Devils, unbeknownst to pretty much everyone until this past weekend. So special thanks to her once again for coming on the show and agreeing to grace us with her presence here on the Calder Farmstead. I mean, I'm still kind of in awe and in shock that,
and I mean too, the Devils really gave off you think your partner's out there shopping maybe for rings and you break up with them via text. Like that is,
ooh,
that is very much the vibes coming out from Binghamton. Binghamton played a game on the ice, so we previewed it. I feel like it's only appropriate after spending that much time, talking about the off-ice stuff. We should talk about the things that, happened in hockey that are going on score sheets in Binghamton.
Yes, indeed. And the only one game that the Hershey Bears played this weekend was against the Binghamton Devils because I believe their game against Lehigh Valley was postponed, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. So a one-game series, which is all too common this offseason, unfortunately, all too common this season in such an off year is what I meant to say. But yeah, we both picked Hershey, and the model overwhelmingly picked Hershey at 68.5% over the Devils. The result, guess what? It was Hershey, 6-3 on Saturday against Bingo. So, it's always going to be an uphill battle for Bingo this season, it seems.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, especially with, they had no Ben, no Street, no Foot, no Student each. Brent Sendney looked like he mentally checked out a month ago. So that was, he hasn't looked good pretty much the entire year. Like he had that opening weekend, I think it was overtime winner. And the rest of the season, he's just been a ghost. Without Street, Foot, Student each, this was always going to be a rough go. So the fact that the model was pretty high on Hershey here, not much of a surprise given who was just simply available for Binghamton.
Now, that all said, are there any positives to take away from this weekend, or from the one game rather, from Binghamton and the Devils?
Yeah, there are at least a few. So, it's not all doom and gloom for Binghamton. AJ Greer went from invisible man in Bridgeport to standing out in a good way in Binghamton this weekend. And I'm surprised by it. His play in Bridgeport had me thinking there was an injury. And that could still be true that he's, playing through something. But he looked like a guy with a new lease on life, which is not something I can imagine has been said about many people who moved to Newark. But Zetterlund and Martell both stepped up as they were asked to do more in the absence of Street and Foot and Student each. They got to play a bigger role. And honestly, I thought that was going to be another doom and gloom moment for the B Devils. But I hadn't thought much of Zetterlund this year, but he looks to me to at least be a good middle six guy in the AHL going forward. Martell played a pretty good game. He's always been that guy more or less. And if he could stay out of the box with bad penalties, I think he could be closer to a top six guy than a middle six guy. But the fact that he's found his usual level of production this season, despite the surroundings, says something about his resilience and the solidity of the process of his game. He is very much a guy who likes to kind of mix it up, which I'm a guy who on the ice myself, even in, beer league, I like to get in there and mix it up a little bit. So I'm not frowning upon that part of his game. I think it would be better if he mixed it up to the tune of like 75% of his usual PIMs instead of all of them. I think that would really change the outlook from him from a value perspective.
Now you're talking about PIMs. This game was maybe not, chock full of PIMs, but definitely full of some cheap after whistle nonsense for sure.
Yeah. Anytime that Phoenix Copley is looking to throw some hands, you know that the game has gotten a little wild.
Wow.
And you're absolutely hit the nail on the head. This was definitely full of a lot of after whistle scuffles that just felt very, to quote the kids these days, very extra. Martel giving Gersich a few punches on the ground, which I don't think was nearly as dramatic as some of the Bears fans made it out to be. But yeah, he did that and got like the extra 2-minute penalty for roughing he got there, I feel like was the appropriate call. I know Zach Fish on the call was losing his mind because it didn't seem at first like that was going to be what happened. But they made the right call eventually. But I feel like there was definitely a little bit of overreaction there. But Gersich shoving Colton White on the way to the high five line after he scored a goal was maybe one of the most extra things I have seen in a hockey game for a while. Like, dude scores a goal on his way to, the high five train on the bench, a thing we've seen a million times. He's like, oh yeah, Colton White just happens to be standing somewhat ish there, like just skating by, minding his own business. And Gershich is like, no, I need to shove this guy because
reasons.
Like big scuffle ensues, penalties get assigned. And it was just like one of those where it's just like, that served no purpose and was stupid. Like if you didn't just score a goal and go to the penalty box afterward, like I would be putting you on the bench if I were Spencer Carberry. Copley and AJ Greer getting into it after Nate Schmelzer takes a maybe late whack at a puck Copley covered at the end of the second. Like, is it late in the sense that should there have been 10 minutes left in the period, that was a reasonable play as the whistle had blown? Sure. Is it late in the sense that there's like a second left in the period and that's real extra? Also, yes. AJ Greer, Copley kind of came out of his way to like not block AJ Greer per se, but give him a little bit of a piece of his mind as he was going by there, which I didn't think was terribly necessary. Greer just didn't respond exactly in a friendly manner. Shocker. No. But the two of them had a little, not a fight, but a very good, grappling match, I would say. But there was a lot of just unnecessary extra whistle stuff that didn't feel so much like two tense teams in a playoff atmosphere as much as one frustrated team and another just completely taking the bait on it.
Yeah, and Greer getting two minor penalties there, the slashing and the roughing call, and even Copley getting a roughing penalty because of his shenanigans there at the end of the second period. It's like, yeah, I know Hershey just scored, 3 straight on you to finish out the period in the span of the last 5 minutes. But yeah, you got to keep your cool and not let the game get away from you. And I mean, it kind of did there at the end of the second. But I mean, overall, let's look at the overarching picture. We'll go widescreen here. Talk about some of the other things that you noticed about this game.
I mean, first, there are a lot of sloppy mistakes in the first period by both sides. That was not a good. It was a fun period of hockey, but I would not call it a well executed period of hockey for the second best league in the world, or arguably the second best league in the world.
Sure.
But Bingo made more of those bad turnovers, which we're accustomed to seeing them do. But Hershey's ended up in the back of the net. One in particular off just a bad read by Rob O'Gara, who I think played an awful game in general. I don't think he's necessarily an ECHL caliber defenseman per se, but he's a number 5 defenseman in the AHL, a bottom pair guy for reasons like that. Like I saw the play he was trying to make, but that was a perfect moment because he wasn't under pressure, like to take the extra second and make a better pass or make a better decision. A reverse around, I wouldn't have gone glassing out there. I didn't feel like that was merited, but the pass to the front there that was a bad read, and they paid for it. Speaking of defensemen, I also said last week, the preview episode, that I'd play 5 forwards over any other defenseman on the power play when we were kind of hashing out who should be on those units, and I had Ledoux and Schilling on them, and said, like, if one of them gets hurt, I'm playing 5 forwards because I don't want Faravari anywhere near my power play, or O'Gara or Eddie Whitcow or anything like that. I would like to walk that back a little bit and say I would change that and put Alexiev on power play 1. I think that his assist in this game was some fortunate luck, as I don't think Gersich was his intended target for that pass, but they don't ask how, they ask how many. But his willingness to come off the blue line and join the cycle down low, plus a gorgeous one-touch Royal Road pass for a one-timer by Riet that he didn't bury. Like those are the looks that you see from him that really makes me think like he should be power play one quarterback, and the second unit should rotate between Ledoux and Schilling. Those three basically should fill those two power play roles in a 4 forward, 1 defenseman look. But I don't want to spend too much time on the power play because that horse has been beaten to death already. I do want to talk about the penalty kill for the Bears, though. And they did a penalty kill that was effective, but not in the way that we traditionally think of effective penalty kills. Like when I tell you effective penalty kill, like if I said the Bears had a very effective penalty kill this year, when you think of that, what comes to mind? Like shot blocks,
getting in the passing lanes, just, yeah.
That was not really why the Bears were so effective in this one. They were effective because they disrupted entries. They kept the B-Devils from setting up anything. That was a kind of point that we made. I don't even remember what episode now. We're on 30. They're all kind of a blur at this point. But we talked about how, a good penalty kill is not just that in-zone aspect, but also does an effective job of disrupting entries, of keeping you from getting settled in the zone and setting up in that 1-3-1 formation. And the Bears did a great job of that this weekend. They defended their blue line well. They generated pressure along the walls and made sure that the Devils never really got comfortable or got to set anything up. They basically made them waste the maximum amount of time possible on those power plays in order to get anything going, and they just never did. They killed the penalty. They killed the clock and not necessarily had to play in zone defense that much. And their penalty kill has been really effective all the way through the season. And I don't know if we've given them enough credit for that. So I wanted to, give a little shout out to the Bears penalty kill for what was a very non-traditional effectiveness from them this weekend.
Hershey. Okay. So they had 47 shots on goal on this game compared to Binghamton's 26. Binghamton finished the second and the third period with 7 shots on goal apiece. Hershey had 14 in the first, 17 in the second, and 16 in the third. And how many goals did Hershey score between the second and third periods? Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of their 6 goals in the last 2 periods. So imagine that. You throw all those pucks on goal, and Gil Shen is he's not going to stop all of them. That's for sure. But anyway,
I will say real quick here.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know what it is about games that Binghamton plays this year, but having seen way more of them than I feel like I rightfully should, I don't know what it is about them getting into games with these insane shot totals and me having seen those games just simply saying, that's unbelievable. I actually do not believe it. Like, I know that the people who are counting these shot totals are by and large not, going home after the game and diving into their Scrooge McDuck pool of gold. Like they're mostly unpaid volunteers or, if anything, lowly paid volunteers. Right. And if I had to, take a shot in the dark here and say they do not receive, 40-hour visual courses on doing this job. And that's okay. Like it's a fast-paced game. You're going to miss stuff. That's why when I see shot totals like that, I remember like there are humans tracking these. And as someone who has had to do exactly this job for Stats Track, the hockey ops job that I work, like that's difficult to get those totals correct. And they definitely get inflated in cases because again, they're not going back and replay to adjust these or pull them down or whatever. Whatever they see in the moment is what's going on. So I don't think having watched that game that I completely believe that shot total is that high. I would say there's definitely some inflation going on in that shot total, but that's okay. I will say, as Hershey did put a lot of rubber on the net, they also got a lot of really good bounces for them. Pino's slap shot goal deflects off Carrick's stick and goes top corner. Like that's as Jill Sen would probably make note here. Like there ain't nothing you're doing about that. Like that shot went from being a low slapper to top blocker side corner. There ain't nothing you're doing there. Like that's just a bad luck bounce. Faravari's goal deflects off of Riley Walsh's stick and goes in on something that I'm 75% sure was a pass to the slot and not a intended shot on goal, but bangs right off the back of the blade, the heel of Riley Walsh's stick, tips in 5-hole on Gilles Sen. Again, Those are 2 goals off of just fortunate bounces. Now, Hershey was the best team in this game. And when you're the best team and you're firing a bunch of pucks, sometimes good luck will happen to you. But I don't think that this game was Hershey scoring process goals, and that's why it was this. That's why the game went this way. Like, yeah, they were the better team and they got some good bounces, but I think some of that was a little bit of puck luck for them.
Sure sounds like it. Hershey is second in the North Division at .727. That their point percentage rather is .727 after 22 games played. Binghamton continues to dwell in the basement of the North, 5-10-5-1 with a .381 points percentage. They are 7th out of 7 teams there in the North Division this year. So with that said, let's move on. Let's keep trucking. Let's go to the Central Division. We'll head west. We'll talk Iowa and Grand Rapids because that's what we talked about in the preview, of course. Friday and Saturday, Iowa ventured to Grand Rapids, Michigan, played the Griffins there at their home at 7 Eastern Daylight Time, both games. I picked an Iowa sweep. Sean, you picked the split. Grand Rapids on Friday, Iowa on Saturday. The model had Grand Rapids slightly above Iowa at 51.4%. The results, a dramatic 5-4 Grand Rapids victory on Friday. Iowa clawing back into it, almost snatching victory from the jaws of defeat, but alas, couldn't get that 5th and final goal after tying it 4-4. 4-3 overtime win for Iowa on Saturday. So guess who was correct in his picks? Mr. Sean O'Brien. Well done.
Yep.
That guy. Yeah.
Well, I got ground to make up after when we get to the Barracuda because
hey, all of us were incorrect on that one. I mean,
you guys were at least less wrong, and
fair. But
that's another series for another guest. Let's dive into this one here.
Absolutely. Griffins with only 4 roster defensemen in both games, and that bit them in the ass a few times, understandably so. Sean, what is going on here with the Griffins?
Well, we got to this point because of what is clearly a COVID situation here. Now, the details of all of that are not going to be known to us, but they did manage to let it slip that this was a COVID thing. So that's very clearly why there are 4 defensemen and you have forwards playing defensemen. Another weird one was McIsaac has been taking warm-ups but not playing. I'm not sure if this is a conditioning issue. It is definitely an odd thing though. But he has been taking warm-ups and it seems like they need, the Griffins straight up need warm bodies on the blue line right now. I'm assuming it's injury related, but the AHL and its chamber of secrets with injury data is a thing unto itself. But yeah, you are correct that playing defensemen or playing forwards at defense bit them on the ass a few times in this weekend series. Case in point, Mayhew's Friday goal was because he was left alone by Spezia in the front as Spezia went chasing behind the net to cut off a passing lane. Now,
he's a forward.
What's that?
I said he's a forward.
Yeah. And that's something that a center can and will often do in that spot. But it's not something the weak side defenseman should ever do.
No.
I mean, Spezia also made an atrocious no-look behind the back pass that went right to Matthew Boldy, who caught Kevin Boyle with some lazy post play, gave the Wild a lead. Spezia also misread a reverse play behind the net by Dastus, and the Wild put it directly in the net. Now, Spezia in those plays was right where he was supposed to be as a center. As a defenseman, though, he's off where he should be and was late in recovering. Now, is that his fault? Technically, yes, it is. Do I blame him for that? Nope. Shocker. Changing your mindset to unlearn all of the habits and positioning of where you're supposed to be on the ice when something is happening. A mindset you spent a minimum of 3 months reinforcing on a daily basis, yet changing that is not an overnight process. To make a, kind of weak but somewhat relatable comparison, how many times in January did you write 2020 instead of 2021 when you had to put the date for something? Yeah. Maybe you remembered it was not 2020 a little more quickly, but like most years, you're screwing that up because you spent the whole year writing the last year on it. It takes most people till February, March to be consistently putting the right year on the first try. That's how I would chalk this up. Like, Did he play a bad game for a defenseman? Yes, but I think a lot of his sins are explainable there with some context. And given that situation, you kind of had to expect moments like that to happen. And he was not alone in the making forward plays as a guy who's supposed to be playing defense, but is actually a forward. You saw it, in spots all over the place, but those were three most egregious and ones that if you go back and watch the highlights of those goals, you can see what I'm talking about rather clearly, as opposed to like some of the more minute details you might pick up would be a little bit too far down the rabbit hole for us, I think, at this point, especially as it's getting late at night and I'm tired.
That's completely fair. Now, the overall was a pretty close series and both games seemed fairly evenly matched. Like I said, with that Iowa comeback in the third, we'll get to that on the Friday game. But we talked about two big keys for Iowa in the preview: stay out of the box and glue defenders to Barber and Smith. Let's start with the penalties portion. How did that go?
I mean, these were definitely some competitive and very fun games to watch. Neither side really took control for more than a shift or two throughout both games. In terms of penalties, the Wild were much better on Friday than Saturday. To be fair, the officiating was more consistent on Friday than Saturday, as I thought Saturday's game was another in a long line of shifting penalty standards throughout an AHL hockey game, or even, you see that at just about every level. But I don't think, we need to really go there. That horse is already dead. I don't see the need to keep hitting it. On the actual penalty kill, it's like night and day from earlier in the season for Iowa. Their forwards at the top of the PK are communicating and making the shift so much better when the puck goes from one side to the other. I don't know how much of that is having Jerry Mayhew back and killing penalties, but they have done a much better job compared to, say, early March from now. Like, I remember we talked about them in early March, and I was just saying, I don't even know what they're doing. Like, I've been watching hockey a long time. I've studied tactics for all situations, and I continue to do so on a regular basis. And I have no idea what the Iowa penalty kill was doing in March. And now it's like, no, this is a very well-structured, well-organized penalty kill. And I don't want to put all of that on Jerry Mayhew's shoulders because I feel like that's giving him too much credit. But he is a good part of that penalty kill. And, I mean, I do believe that his hair has magical powers, so it could be his fault.
I was just going to say that. You took the words right from my mouth. When the Mayhew flow is going to go, the PK is also going to flow. So there you go. Lots of rhyming, trying to put it together. Let's talk about the second point. Neutralizing Barber and Smith. How did that go for the Wild this weekend?
I mean, I don't know about neutralizing. The Wild aren't SEAL Team 6. In terms of defending, though, they were okay through two periods on Friday. Barber had his chances, but they were mostly contained. Third period of Friday, not so much. Definitely not on Saturday. Barber ran pretty wild Saturday, I would say.
Ran pretty wild. Oh, I see what you did there. I know. Okay. So it sounds like you think the Wild played better Friday than Saturday, which is odd because they won Saturday and lost Friday. Now, let me break this down real quick. Third period, we're looking at a 3-0 Grand Rapids lead going into the middle of the third. 9:32, you have a Jerry Mayhew goal. 9:46, Brandon Duhaime with the goal. And 10:08, Mason Shaw. So in the span of 36 seconds, you have three Wild players even up the game. And then Boldy adds another one to it at 14:41. So Iowa up 4-3 on Friday. And then Taro Hirose at 17:12 knots it up. Dominic Turgeon in the 11th hour, 19:18 in the third period. What a game. Watching Elaine tweet this was madness. I tell you what, here I am in Indy getting acclimated, getting ready to cover the Fuel versus the Comets for a feature piece I'm doing. Stay tuned for that. And I'm watching Elaine tweet this game and I'm just like, this is madness. This is crazy. This is insane. But I digress. What was the difference that led them to play worse, but win on Saturday? That's what I'm curious about.
Well, one thing's for sure. This game's third period was definitely appropriately featuring the Wild because it was very wild and a lot of fun. Both games were a lot of fun. Sure. And hockey games are won and lost as a team for a multitude of reasons. You got to get pucks deep, give 100%. I'm not going to give you platitudes or hockey coach speak. But it is hard to not see that loss on Friday and not put a good portion of blame on anyone besides Hunter Jones.
Hunter Jones. Ah, good old Hunter.
Now, I'm 65% sure that Troy Danger Zone Loggins got a tip on that third goal. But the Zapruder style clarity on that replay really doesn't help me. So we're just going to not give it to him, I guess. Chris Crollo tipped the Griff's second goal. So those are two tip goals that you really can't put on Hunter Jones. His tips are just, they're wild cards. You're in a goalie down in your butterfly, and you're just praying to the gods that it hits you. But I do want to say on that Chris Crollo tip that he got, I have no idea what Hunter Jones' save selection was there for the shot that was coming to him. Like, take the tip completely out of the situation. He's like trying to catch this puck like a catcher in baseball. Like, he's going like this to catch. Yeah. And I'm like, I am not a goalie expert. I was not a goalie, but I do know that is not the position you're supposed to be making a save that's going into that spot in. Like, that was one of the most awkward looking attempts at a glove save before the puck got tipped. So I don't know what he was doing there, but that's not what that's supposed to look like. Mm-hmm. But with Hunter Jones had a minimum of two just awful goals. That rebound on Chris Crollo, and that's something that Jones has struggled with all season. He's struggled to seal the bottom of the net and collect rebounds in a timely or reasonable fashion. He struggles to track the puck when it is near him. Like, he gives up a bad rebound and then he can't find it. And he ends up with these bad goals that just get banged in because he can't control the rebound and he can't collect it when it does happen. And he's not doing a good job of sealing the bottom of the net or, the small gaps in that cases. That second, the goal by Hershey, that's a benchable offense in my opinion. Like, that is something where if I were Tim Army, you would have been stapled to the bench. Like, I actually would have gone to Staples, gotten a stapler, and then stapled you to the bench. That short side snipe by Hershey on a dead angle cannot happen. That can't happen in the first period of a game you're winning 2-0. That can't happen in the third period of a game you're winning 6-1. That goal cannot happen. And yet here we are. Another goal let up by Hunter Jones where you're like, how? How do you let that goal in? That short side snipe from Hershey from below the faceoff dot outside this, the home plate area. Yeah. Short side. Side. I think if Barabo plays Friday, he definitely makes one of those goals into a save, and that changes the entire game.
Truly. Yeah. The Wild might win that game.
Yeah. And shocker, that was the big difference Friday to Saturday for me is Barabo started. And Barabo made saves when they needed saves to be made. Like, did he play a flawless game? No, he made some mistakes. He let up some goals that maybe kind of sort of should have had. But, that's the big difference between the Wild with Barabo and the Wild with Hunter Jones is Barabo can make those saves and won't often give you those goals where you're just like, how? How does that go in? Hunter Jones not only will do that, he does do that.
Heart of a lonely hunter indeed. Oi. Well, from Iowa's goaltending to Grand Rapids goaltending, Caden Fulker got the nod on Saturday for Grand Rapids. He lost the goalie duel, and I use that term loosely, to Barabo. What did you think of Fulker?
Well, this felt like more of an emergency start than anything. Like, I don't know if there's more COVID explanations in the goalie room for why Caden Fulcher got this start. Like, he's a young goalie and development and blah, 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 but he's not a draft pick. He's not I can't imagine Detroit has their eye on them and goalie of the future. If he turns into anything, I think that's found money for them. But he hasn't looked good in his time in the ECHL. And while he didn't exactly look like, what we've seen from middling ECHL goalies in the AHL per se, there were definitely some scary moments where he lost track of the puck or was off his angle. He's definitely not a polished goaltender with his movement or puck tracking, but I have to imagine that there's, some reasoning for that. He's played 2 whole professional games since the 18-19 season, and this was his first action of the year. So while I wasn't impressed by his play, I think there's a lot of context as to why Saturday was a rough outing for him in shaking off rust and getting up to speed on a league whose skill level he's very not used to. And even if he had been used to it, that's a lot of time to be sitting on the sidelines to, be thrust into a game action.
Right.
I'd be surprised if he panned out as a capable AHL starter, but it's not impossible. goalies have come from far weirder circumstances to be useful goalies at this level and beyond. I just would say that that's not a likely outcome at this moment.
Fair. And back to your point about, coming in after not playing, active game time for so long. I think a lot of goalies ran into that problem. Adam Werner with the Colorado Eagles. I mean, he was on the taxi squad for a good portion of the beginning of the season. And when I watched him play, I mean, he had to knock a little rust off. So yeah, I'm sure a lot of goaltenders that have bounced back and forth between the taxi squad and an active AHL roster came into that. Yes, sir.
One thing I wanted to mention too, he let up a goal where I believe it was him. So I may be wrong about this, but I believe it was him who let up a goal where the shot knocked the strap of his helmet off. And in the ensuing scramble, the next shot that came in, which was 2 seconds later, is basically a direct rebound, goes right in. And I think that if you're a more veteran goalie, as soon as you feel that strap coming off, you're ripping that mask off. And I've seen it a number of times. It's a rare thing for your strap to get knocked off, but that's one thing where if you're a goalie, because that helmet fits snugly on you, it moves with your head. You don't have any of this shaking around nonsense. But as soon as that strap comes loose, it's like wearing a paper bag with 2 holes cut in it. It's going to move all over the place. So you slide across the crease to try and make a save, and suddenly you have 2 bars in your eyes, and the puck goes in. But that's when you're 22 and you haven't played game action in that long. That's a veteran move that you're probably not having in your toolbox at that moment. But I just wanted to point that out too, that was another goal that he let up that I'm like, was it his fault? Yes, but I think a savvier veteran move there might have saved him.
Yeah, you think Pat Nagel definitely rips that mask off if he feels the strap, because he's been playing for a minute for sure. Closing thoughts on the weekend of Iowa and Grand Rapids.
So Donovan Sabrango was brought up a lot on the broadcast, and I wanted to say a bit about him. He does a lot of the small things that don't show up on score sheets. Zone exit passes under pressure versus, just glassing out and not getting benched. Those are important little plays that help drive an offense, but don't necessarily get you on the score sheet, but they do you favors with the coaching staff and with your teammates. He defends the blue line well in transition. That's another, tiny little nuance that a lot of guys don't do well, especially at this level. But he seems to have a pretty good skill level for gapping up and making sure that he's not giving the zone up easily. But that's definitely some praise that he has earned, and rightfully so. But he still does a lot that there's still a lot that does show up on the score sheet that he's not quite bringing. His playmaking vision, the ozone, is not quite there. He's a mobile defenseman, but he's not leading rushes despite having good skating, and I feel like an ability to do that. Is that a comfort thing? Is that a confidence thing? I mean, those are intangible questions that I think at this point we've established I can't answer. But there is still a reason where I feel like he's not showing up on the score sheet despite doing a lot of good little things. Now, I don't think he's as bad as the model grades him, because the model doesn't watch film with me. It, reads the statistical outputs and turns that into something more useful. So his statistical outputs that it reads are not that great. The model thinks he sucks. But I also don't think he's as good as the broadcasters praise him, who were very effusive repeatedly on the broadcast for him. And I understand. I went back and forth between the Grand Rapids and Iowa broadcasts. I flipped between periods. But I thought that was a little over the top for a guy who really has not quite shown that much at this level yet. But a good little nugget to take away. I think he, with a little bit of development, could definitely become a good skater for the Grand Rapids Griffins. He definitely, as I like to think of a development, is a jar, and you have to put rocks, pebbles, and sand in it. The most important thing you put in there are the rocks. They have to go in first, because if you put the sand in first, nothing else is going to fit. And he definitely has some of those big rocks that need to go in there, but there are pebbles and sand missing still.
Last but not least, we did get a question from the Iowa Wild fan page about how we think the Iowa Wild will do in the playoffs. Now, let's preface this. I mean, we're going to say that, obviously no playoff format has been announced yet. There hasn't been an official announcement to the contrary that there will not be the Calder Cup playoffs, but in a hypothetical playoffs, how do you view the Wild stacking up in a postseason?
I mean, that's hard to assess for any season. We have no idea what roster construction, call-ups, taxi squads, blah, 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 are going to look like. I mean, is Mayhew going to be there? Is Boldy going to be there? Are they going to be in Minnesota? Because that changes the outlook of this team dramatically. And both of those are guys who are clear targets for the Wild to, get some taxi squad action. Mayhew started the season there. Boldy's, one of their top prospects. They want to see what he looks like on the NHL sheet. But overall, like just issuing those concerns to then completely ignore them. Overall, Iowa seems to be peaking at the right time for a hypothetical playoff. I would have depth concerns about Chicago. I don't think they match up well with a team that's as deep as Chicago. I think that they could do well against a team like Grand Rapids or Cleveland and maybe pull off a quote unquote upset, even though, those are higher ranking teams, but they're all kind of mushed together. I definitely would not stack them up evenly against those teams. They still have a lot of depth concerns for me. I think Kale and Addison's basically their only useful defenseman in terms of transition and offense. And they have a lot of guys that I see in their bottom six and their bottom pairing on defense where I'm like, yeah, about that. And especially too, when it comes playoff time, this probably isn't that much of a secret, but teams don't line match in the AHL during the regular season, basically at all. They just roll 4 lines and whatever happens kind of happens.
Sure.
They'll manage ice time, but not necessarily, the quality of competition that's going on out there. You're really not going to see, coaches trying to get crafty and get their first line out there for a shift against the other team's goon line or something like that. That really doesn't happen on purpose, the AHL during the regular season. During the playoffs, though, you will see more of those line matchups, and you're not going to be able to hide your bottom defenseman and your bottom 2 lines. And for the Wild, I think that those are probably the bottom of the Central in terms of hypothetical playoff teams. They have the worst depth. And while I think they have enough to pull it off, because I think Barabeau is probably one of the better goalies in the division, I'd put him over anyone on Grand Rapids. And I think he could definitely battle to a draw with Tarasov at this point, probably not in the future, but I think they could pull it off, but I would definitely be concerned. I could easily see them doing a Game 7 heartbreaker in an opening round against Grand Rapids or somebody like that.
What about a best of 5 series in the first round?
I actually think a best of 5 would probably favor them over a best of 7, which sounds like a silly thing, but I think they are the upset team. And when you're the upset team, you want to play fewer games. You want there to be more of a chance where all you got to do is steal 1 game, steal 2 games. The more games you have to steal, the more the fact that you are outmatched, plays a factor. Still 7 games, the biggest factor in them is who's hot and who gets lucky. But I think a 5-game series would favor them a little bit. Now, if they go up against Chicago, I'm thinking Chicago in that series. But I could envision a world where I take Iowa in a 5-game or 7-game series over Grand Rapids or Cleveland. Some outside circumstances would need to happen, but it's definitely, they would have a real shot in those series. I don't think anyone beats Chicago in the Central still.
No, I think they make it to the Western Conference Finals as there ought to do in this day and age, especially with the team that they have. But with that all said, that's it for Iowa and Grand Rapids. Let's segue. We'll take a break first, but we're going to segue into Paige Siewert coming back on the program in lieu of Murray Pam, unfortunately being unavailable this evening. Paige is coming on the program, and she's going to help us finish up our coverage, rather, of Belleville and Stockton in the single game that they played over the weekend. So, Paige, coming on the show from Full Press Hockey, great part of the AHL team. Glad she's aboard. So, take a moment. We're going to run some ads. We'll be back soon. We go from the Midwest and the Central Division up north over to Canada. The Canadian Division is next, and we had a game that we previewed with Murray Pam of Full Press Hockey. The NHL editor covers the Ottawa Senators, covers the Belleville Senators as well. So we had him on Friday when the weekend preview episode dropped. And unfortunately, Murray can't join us tonight. He gave a lot of good insight on the Belleville Senators, but we did manage to get another person from Full Press Hockey, and the other side of the coin of the Belleville Senators and Stockton Heat matchup from Saturday. She covers, the Stockton Heat of Calgary this season for Full Press Hockey. We are bringing back on Paige Siewert. Paige, welcome back to the show.
Hi, guys. Good to be back.
Always
good to have you.
Thanks.
Yes, always good to have you. Yes. All right. Well, let's get started. We're going to talk about our picks first, and we'll throw Murray's pick in here because I'm going to think yours and his picks probably lined up a little bit. Murray picked Stockton to defeat Belleville on Saturday. I picked Stockton to defeat Belleville on Saturday. Sean picked Belleville. Don't gloat. You know, I hate it when you gloat.
Ding, 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 ding. Oh, other side. Ding, ding.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, yeah. Which side team on? Oh, there you go. He's doing the Hulk Hogan. What you gonna do, brother, when Sean's amazing accurate picks run wild on you?
Oh, don't worry. We'll get to my great picks that I made in that San Jose, Texas series later. So
yes, we will.
We're giving my space to gloat now while I can still hold on to hope.
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, it was, you picked Belleville. You picked Mandalese versus Sparks. If that was going to happen, you'd pick Stockton, but it probably isn't going to happen. And it did not happen, I don't believe. I believe it was Gustafson in net.
Gustafson was in net. Yeah, that's if I would have known this goalie matchup ahead of time. I think Gustafson has surprisingly had a pretty decent season. So I'd have taken Belleville had I known, had I had that kind of magic foresight, but I didn't.
Hey, I don't think Belleville even has that magic foresight. I'm sure they're probably like, well, all right, who are we going with tonight? No. But yes, the model even picked Stockton at 53.9%, just slightly above the median there. But yeah, Belleville ended up taking this game 4-1 on Saturday. Oh boy, after a break from the insanity of their schedule, we marked this as a get right series for the Heat. I even said that verbatim. They dropped both Wednesday and Thursday's game. Sean, you said that they looked better than they had recently on Wednesday. That clearly did carry over to Thursday, but did the Heat get back on track on Saturday? Sean, Paige, we'll get your opinion here in a second.
They did not. And to be fair to them, I don't think either side is truly happy with how they played on Saturday. That was an ugly game, ugly game full of turnovers, unsuccessful dump and chase, blocked shots, missed shots, and just bad execution all around from both sides. Credit to the broadcast team who did their damnedest to make that game feel fun, but it was not. I almost nodded off in the first period. I'm not even gonna lie. That was not a fun game to endure as a analyst or a fan or anything like that. Whatever energy level that Stockton regained on Wednesday was just gone by today. Like, they did come out on Wednesday and looked fresher and more upbeat, had their legs to them. And I mean, they had a couple of days off from what was, as you said, just a brutal schedule. But whatever life that break breathed into them, it was gone by Saturday. There were a lot of moments in which it looked like they were just going through the motions energy in the second and third period. Petrovic played well. It was good to see him come back. He was physical, was able to get the puck moving. I thought he should have been on, on the top power play unit the whole time, but that's not a huge problem. Ruzicka came back after a 3-day press box vacation on the taxi squad. He clearly did not have a good game in this one. That boarding call was maybe one of the dumber calls I've seen this season, in terms of just blatantly like, why? What were you doing? You had to know that was going to happen. Dominic Simone came back with him, and I thought he played really well. So his presence plus Ruzicka and Petro has to at least be a silver lining here for Heat fans. I thought, honestly, Stockton appeared to be the better team in this game, but that doesn't always mean victory. Ask any Toronto Maple Leafs fan, and they will confirm that for you.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that Ruzicka goal in that first period, the Ruzicka boarding call that led to a Belleville goal. It kind of set the tone for the rest of the game, in my opinion. Paige, your thoughts?
I mean, kind of, you touched on the key points that I noticed as well. I just think the energy from the weekday games to the weekend ones, it fell flat, but it also fell flat because in my opinion, it's these guys were really excited when they beat Laval, and they go into a break and they can soak in that win for almost a week. And then they go into the next game, they're ready to go, and then they lose that one. Then they lose the next one. And then they get into that game and they're down and they lose again. And it's interesting. I haven't had a place to put this into an article yet, but a few weeks ago when they were in the heat of the heat, didn't even mean to put that in there, but we're going to put that in there. When they're in the heat of their losing streak there, we talked to Garrett Sparks, and he was saying that this team, when they started out, they were a really good team. They were winning games. And then with all these young guys, they almost forgot what it was like to lose. And I think that's just carried over into these games going forward. It's like once they're losing in a game, they feel like it's beyond their control. They just let it die. And it's really tough to see, especially when you're covering the team and you see all their games and you see kind of the potential of certain players and players that are getting on hot streaks and some that could really use a bump, and they just don't do anything with it. It's very disheartening because they could be better. I also did think they played a pretty decent game, but it just wasn't enough. I don't know what's going on. They're getting quite a few shots on net lately, but I just don't think they're quality shots on net. So they're not developing into scoring chances. So the guys are in the right spot. They're just not maybe taking that extra second to place their shots. But yeah, it's tough because you wish that there were a few more games for them to snap back into it and kind of get into a run to finish out the season. But when you're only playing 30 games, there's not a whole lot you can do at this point.
Yeah, that's another good point too, is like, this is a rut that you see even the best teams go through in normal seasons, and they just eventually kind of work their way out of it, or, I guess the other option is they don't, but like, this is also, I keep coming back to this when I think of the Heat and watching them earlier in the season to now. It's like, they played such a high tempo, in your face, like physical style, and that grind of the schedule has really seemed to just take the energy level from them. And that was the core of their game, was them bringing that energy level that it just doesn't seem like they're able to match now. And that gives me at least some hope for a future season from them, in that if they can keep this should be much more sustainable in terms of pace and tempo in a regular, season when you're playing 11 games a month, as opposed to this one where you're playing a dumb number of games every 30 days. So I think that's a silver lining. They've had guys that have looked good. There's definitely, I think, some fat to trim, but that's also just a byproduct of taxi squads existing. When, Calgary is going to call 5-6 guys from your roster, and they need them to be, passable NHL players on any given night. You're going to have some guys who shouldn't be in the lineup, but that's the nature of the beast. I'll also say too, it's got to be kind of disheartening for, like, Ruzicka just came back, and he literally, I called it a 3-day press box vacation, because that's what it was. He didn't see the ice at all in Calgary. And like, the guys worked really hard and played really well for Stockton this year. To get called up like that has got to feel like a reward. And then to sit like that has got to feel like you worked all of that. You got into a Calgary Flames practice, and then for what? Like, they didn't even give you a shot. And I'm confused on that on both ends. Like, I don't understand if you're Calgary. Like, I know that there's a daily cap hit that they're trying to work around with moves between the taxi squad and the main roster. But like, the guys in the minors, that shouldn't affect. So why are you pulling Ruzicka up for 2 days of NHL practice to not put him into a game to then send him back down? Like, to me, that's baking in a player feeling dissatisfied into the process. But not every decision is made with all of the variables known to us. And also teams make mistakes all the time. This just seemed more like a blatant one from our perspective. Paige, what do you think about that?
When I did see the news about it, I thought it was kind of more of a replacement for Sam Bennett. Not that they're on the same level, but I figured that he could easily slide in as a fourth liner. And I did kind of expect him to be in that next Flames game, or I expected him to be there longer. I'm not completely convinced that he's down in Stockton for good. Maybe they call him back, but they are playing Monday night, so you would think if he was going back, he would be back. It's also tough to see on the team side of it as well, because we talked to Matthew Phillips the other day, and he was very excited, very happy for him, because he's another guy who's kind of been right there and Flames fans and Heat fans have wanted to see Matthew Phillips up in Calgary because he's yet to get his debut with the Flames. And it's just like when you have guys like that worked their butts off all season and they finally think they got the chance to kind of show what they've done and they don't get it, it's kind of like, what are they working towards then? And you kind of wonder if these types of guys are the ones that look for other avenues to develop their career. I mean, not all of that is up to them by any means, but it is tough too. And it's got to take a hit on the morale as well. We even talked to Ruzicka after that Laval game, and he was really excited. We only had about 5 minutes with him because he had to go jump on the bus, but he's a super high energy guy. He's very confident. If he comes back to Stockton, like he did, and he doesn't play kind of the type of game you expect out of him, you can definitely see that took a little bit of a hit on him. But it is unfortunate. I would like to see, it depends how Calgary plays because they're in such a weird spot now too, trying to catch up to the Canadians to possibly make it into the playoffs. But I don't know. I kind of wish that they would go either way, so you could either have these guys get more of an opportunity or either decide if you're going to try and make the playoffs or not. It's just a very weird spot in the season, and I hope that whatever happened kind of surfaces, because it does suck to be a 21-year-old that thinks they're going to make the NHL and then get sent back 2 days later.
Yeah, as far as Calgary's playoff situation goes, I don't think you can trade Sam Bennett at the deadline and be 6 points back of Montreal and be like, yeah, we're going to make a push for playoffs, boys.
Yeah.
MoneyPuck.com currently has them as a 17% chance to make the playoffs. Like Montreal ahead of them is a 19% chance to make the playoffs. Montreal is a 76%. Like, let's be real about this situation. If you're Calgary, this is a shot for you to be bringing up guys like Phillips and Ruzicka.
We'll bring up Mackey and Godin again. Why not? Yeah. They were already up there. They didn't do a whole lot as far as production, but give them a shot. They've been playing pretty consistently down for Stockton. And if you want to build up some of your younger guys, and if this team does go into a rebuild, you're going to need those types of guys.
Yeah. And I mean, that's another thing too. Like if it does something positive for them and for their morale, as well as shows, the other guys that go to Stockton, like if you do well here, we will give you, a shot at the NHL. Mm-hmm. Like I think that's something that if I'm Calgary, that's what I'm doing with my players at this point. Like, there's no need to be, putting your guys in bottom 6 roles who are just grinding through the rest of the season when it's like this season's basically over. Like, just put guys in Stockton in, see what you got out of some of them, see if that production, that game is going to translate well, get them into practices, get them into games, maybe give some other guys, some college free agents a shot in Stockton if you can. But like, this is a spot for those guys to go up and get a chance to shine, get their cup of coffee for the NHL. I don't see why they're doing anything differently, but Calgary has made decisions all season that we've kind of looked at and been like, well, okay, then that is a decision you can make. That is an outcome that was possible. So sure, but okay.
Well, and I feel like the philosophy that you guys are discussing, the kind of why not give these guys a chance? I feel like that was a lot more prevalent last year during the postseason when you had the bubble playoffs and you had these guys that, just off the top of my head, I think Alex Belzil for Montreal, they gave him a shot to do, to play in the postseason. And
Buddy Robinson for the Flames.
There you go. I forgot about Buddy Robinson. And unfortunately Belzil, he got hurt, but it's just the fact that, it's a bit of a head scratcher. Like, why not take these chances? Why not shuffle things up? Why not go for it? And, now is not the time to be conservative, as it were. If you're, down by 2 touchdowns, to use a football analogy, why not go for it on 4th and 2, 4th and 3, 4th and 5? It's like, anyway, I digress. Let's talk a little bit about the game again, but this time from the Belleville side of the coin. And, Stockton, the Stockton Heat of Calgary, rather, as we're calling them this year, they did a really good job of limiting the Senators' chances on goal. 7 shots on goal for Belleville in the first period, 4 for the second, 3 for the third. Unfortunately, 2 of those 4 in the second were goals, and 1 of those 3 in the third was a goal. So not a good ratio for Stockton. And, you don't win many games when they produce that many goals on that little amount of shots. So all of that said, Sean, what about the Belleville side of things here?
And I mean, yeah, the Stockton deserves some credit for limiting chances, but like I said in the intro, this was an ugly game of missed shots, block shots. They managed to keep them to the outside and limit their dangerous chances for sure, but they were still trying to throw pucks on that. They just weren't very successful at it. And in the first period, I think the total shots were 11 for both sides, 12 shots on net total for both sides. And that wasn't from a lack of trying to shoot. It was more of just shots going wide, shots getting blocked. So I don't think that shot total necessarily perfectly encapsulates how one-sided of a game it was, because I don't think it was, the one-sided ass beating that a 29-14 shots on goal disparity would have you think. That being said, Aspro's goal hit some weird stuff in front. I decided to not play Zapruder film to try and figure out exactly what it hit, but that was kind of a fluky redirect. Bodan's goal wasn't. He sniped that. I'm not going to take that one away from him. But overall, Angus Crookshank continues to impress. I still think it's too early to give a full evaluation for sure, but right now he certainly looks like he could be a winning lotto ticket for the B-Sens. I honestly, when I saw that he got called and signed the lineup, and I'm like, oh, that's a guy that they drafted. Sure. I wasn't expecting anything at all, but he has really looked the part of a good AHL player at minimum. Now, I'm always going to put the asterisk of he's played how many games? 8, 9? Are we in double digits yet? Yeah. Don't make solid player evaluations after that. He has looked good so far, but hockey is generally not a season this short, and you will need to be able to hold that level of production play. But I've seen hints from him that makes me think that's possible, but I'm not going to be like, he's an NHLer. Ottawa, look out. You got to. Yeah, no, I'm not doing that. He looks good so far, but we have a short sample here to judge from. Philip Gustafson, though, played really well in this game. He gave the B-Sens big saves when they needed them on a handful of chances that Stockton did break through and generate quality shots. I do agree with Paige that it does seem like Stockton is struggling a little bit to find some of that soft ice that they were earlier in the season. I think some of that too still comes from they had a lot of movement in the offensive zone when they were cycling, and that takes energy. It takes skating, but Gustafson really played well for them. He's managed to string together a pretty solid season for Belleville, and that's been impressive as that team has not always done him big favors in playing defense in front of him. But he, I believe, is at a 917 save percentage for the year, which, given that the average for the league is below 900, that ain't too shabby. And given the defense he's had in front of him that is not full of NHL potential, as it would seem, that's also impressive. I will say the Belleville Senators are not the most talented team in not only the Canadian division, but in the league, but they're resilient and they're sneaking up on teams. They're within striking distance of Manitoba and Toronto right now in the standings. And if Belleville beats Toronto in regulation, maybe takes an OT point or two from Laval, and Stockton beats Manitoba in regulation, Belleville could finish the season in the Canadian division where we thought they were at second, which is wild. Yeah. We thought that this division was going to be close between Belleville, Toronto, and Stockton for those 2, 3, and 4 spots. We thought Manitoba would be bad, but I think that had more to do with we didn't think guys like Gustafson were coming back to Manitoba. But Belleville is starting to sneak up on teams. I mean, their power play is 11th in the league. Their penalty kill is 9th. Their rolling PDO is north of 101 for the first time all season. Their season-long PDO is trending upwards and is, I believe, at 98.5 the last I looked. That will get updated tomorrow night, so it's lagging a little bit behind reality at this moment. But they may not be a team that others are scared to play, but they're certainly a team that needs to stop being underestimated and stop being that team that's like, oh, that's the get right team. It's late in the season now to be making that exclamation, but they're finding ways to grind out ugly wins, and that's not nothing.
Paige, your observations of the Belleville Senators in this game.
I have to agree. They're definitely one of those teams you see on the schedule and you think it's going to be a little bit of a relief. And in these games, it was not. Not that, but they do seem on ice. They seem like they're a very beatable team. That doesn't mean that they still can't play hockey. So if you're not showing up, they'll show up for you, and then look at the score. So, I mean, in the last game on Saturday, I feel like that it doesn't score-wise, it's not a goaltending battle, but between the goaltenders, Gustafson definitely played a better game. Garrett Sparks has been kind of hot and cold, and I know he's there to do a job, and he's aware of the job he's trying to do, and he plays very emotionally, and I got to give him a lot of credit for what he's done this year, but it's just he wasn't playing at the same level. And I mean, if you wanted it to be a low-scoring game to keep it close, that's just not the way that the cards fell in this one. So they've got some solid players. I don't necessarily notice the names on the other side of the ice all the time, but they've got some guys that can shoot the puck and do their job, and that's what they did. So that's kind of with Stockton not playing their best, or maybe not even quite even 75% of their best, they didn't really have a shot in that game.
Yeah, I will say too, people have complained this year about Henderson's jerseys being hard to read. Have you seen Belleville, guys? Like, I had to pause and do like some of this to try and see the, like, I actually like their jersey style a little bit, but those whites they're so hard to read.
Yep, especially from the up top view that you're trying to look down, and you're just like, okay, I need to grab a number and look it up.
Yeah, because that name sure is invisible, that's for sure. Well, hey, we have a couple more notes here off the ice. Random transaction today between two Canadian teams for an AHL contracted player, which feels kind of rare this season. So defenseman Noah King has been loaned from the Stockton Heat to the Manitoba Moose. My eyebrows about hit the top of my hairline when I saw that. I was like, excuse me, I don't know what is happening. And that's pretty far back. So, I mean, that's a Herculean effort for my eyebrow muscles. But yeah, it was really kind of confounding. He signed a 1-year AHL deal with Stockton back on April 14th, 2020. And the 21-year-old defenseman has just played one game with the Heat. Paige and I were talking about that. It was like March 31st against the Marlies. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the only photo that they had when Manitoba was announcing that transaction. So it's like he hasn't been getting any playing time. There's only a few games left. Like you said, Paige, 5 games. Those last 5 games that Stockton are playing are against Manitoba.
So he's going to end up playing more games with the opposition than he did with his own team, if it works out like that. He just has to play 2 games, you guys. 2 out of 5.
Yeah, I mean, 40%. I mean, we'll go with those odds. I think he plays more with Manitoba than he did with the guy.
What are your picks? Let's go.
Oh, right?
I mean, I got to believe that he's just going to spill all the good secrets. No, all right, you should get a shot right here. From here, it's going in the net. Like, he can't make that save. Yeah, that's a weird one for sure, especially as they play a ridiculous number of games against Manitoba for reasons. But like that's a head scratcher of a deal, to just loan him basically to the team you're about to play 5 times in a row, right at the end of the season. Like, I understand, hey, he's not fitting in our roster here. He's someone Calgary still wants to take a look at, so we'll send him somewhere else to just get him some time on the ice. But like, you had to send him to exactly that team. I mean,
exactly now.
yeah. I mean, sure, whatever. It's like I said, we don't always know all the variables, but that one looks kind of weird. It's another one of those Calgary decisions. You're just like, oh, okay, then that's a thing that happened.
I say he plays at least 2 games. I will take that bet.
Well, after they sent him there, he better, like.
I mean,
you're Manitoba. Why are you accepting this guy that you're just going to be like, all right, press box is that way, bathrooms are there, popcorn's that, like.
Yeah.
I mean, you never know. But last but not least, let's talk about the goalie pull 6-pack challenge and Coach Kale Mclean once again proving his ilk in the echelon of AHL coaches in 6-packs that we owe, but yet have not been collected.
Yeah, I am sad to say that we are this far in the season, and we, there are certainly a number of 6-packs available out there. Jay Leach, Spencer Carberry,
Neil Graham.
Yep. Oh my God, I can't think of his name. John Robleski, just to name a few off the top of my head. But Kale Mclean is now claiming his 3rd, or has earned a 3rd. He will not claim yet. but he has earned a third for his goalie pool in this game. He pulled down by 2 with over 4 minutes left, which may be a record for the goalie pool challenge this year. I would have to go back and check the numbers that don't exist, but he absolutely has earned a 6-pack for that pool. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for him, but that's at least a mentality that you can show to your team every game is we're still out here trying to win games. So Kale Mclean is now in sole possession of first place in the goalie pool 6-pack challenge. He has 18 beers that are just hanging out here with me at the patent and trademark office. So let us know what you want, where to send them. They will be yours. But speaking of Kale Mclean, we did get a question from the Stockton Heat forum on Facebook about the future of Kale Mclean. And I actually asked for clarification. I'm like, do you mean of him getting canned or like him taking an NHL assistant job that might open up? Or, I mean, I don't think he's in line for a head coaching job, but certainly an assisting job in like Buffalo or Montreal in the offseason seems not unreasonable. But they said no. They meant him getting canned as the coach of Stockton. Paige, does that seem like a likely outcome given that, this season has not quite gone the way that I think he intended for sure, but that any of us thought it would?
I mean, that kind of comes at a surprise for me. I haven't really seen anything in the hockey Twitter side of things where that's kind of been a demand. I wouldn't say so based off of what I know at this point. They seem to have a pretty tight-knit group as far as their coaching staff goes, and he's been around for the last couple of years, and he was with Abbotsford beforehand. So he knows his stuff. He makes adjustments where it's needed. How his team reacts to those adjustments isn't always going to be perfect, and that's kind of with any coach. If you watch the games, he's constantly switching the lines around. If you watch some of his interviews, he has a lot of insight on what's going on with his team and what needs to change and what needs to be different. Even after kind of a tough first period, some fans would think, oh, you got to go yell at the guys and get them riled up. Or he's like, no, this team is already kind of down a bit. We need to make sure that they know what they're doing right now and to continue to do that to make adjustments. So, I mean, I like the guy a lot. I'm not, personal feelings aside, I don't think he's in a spot where he should expect to pack up his things and not return. I think he does great work for the Heat at the moment. And when I was down in Kansas City, after I left, there was a coaching change down there, and I can kind of understand where that came from, but I just don't feel like that's kind of what's going on with the Heat at the moment. Maybe if we have this conversation a year or two from now, maybe it gets to that. But I mean, after only playing a 30-game season throughout, 2 or 3 months, I don't think you can really make a decision like that. So I would say no, but I could be wrong. You never know what happens.
Yeah. I think for me, my thought would be, I mean, you would, if I were an NHL executive, which I'm not, but if I were an NHL executive and I saw what's happened with the AHL this year with the sprint to the finish and the, general chaos that's kind of surrounded it with COVID, you would have to be like making monumental errors in order for me to be like, no, we're not just going to give you a mulligan for this year. Like, you would have had to be doing lineup errors like that happened in Colorado, like on a weekly basis or something like that, for me to be like, okay, we're now past mulligan territory here. You were just bad at coaching this team. Like, even if I thought that were the case, like that he just wasn't maybe the right coach for this team, I'm giving him a pass to at least next year. Like, yeah. But I don't think that's the case at all. Like, I think Kale Mclean is a pretty good coach. And given the wild set of circumstances that have definitely been unique to his experience this year in having to kind of pack up from Stockton to Canada and figure out how to make all of that work in that scenario, I think that definitely adds a layer of problems to it. His team is very young. As we talked about a little bit, like there are probably going to be some, motivation issues, some maturity issues on that team. And I think that's something that you definitely can iron out with a full season and regular practices and an actual training camp, as opposed to whatever Stockton's had to slap together at the last moment here because Brad Treliving was like, nah, you guys are coming to Calgary. Like I feel like there is a lot of circumstance in which I can find, what has not been the season we thought it would be back in, March that has unfolded. But I don't know if I pin all of that on him. I still think he's a good coach, and it's just been a weird one, and I'm willing to let that just be a mulligan season for him. Now, if he comes back next year and this is still the outcomes we're seeing, yeah, we can have that conversation again. But I don't think his seat should be feeling warm. And if it is, well, that's another one of them Calgary ones. You're like, yeah, that was a choice you could have made.
Yeah,
it's true.
You never know. And looking at the standings, just to kind of put a bow on this, but looking at the standings, I mean, it's literally Laval and everybody else. Laval has 40 points. They've got a .769 points percentage. And, everybody else is falling between the 22 and 26 games played. So it's like there's not a whole lot of disparity in regards to points. But you've got Manitoba, 24, Toronto, Belleville, and Stockton all tied with 21 points. It's like, yeah, like you said, Sean, Stockton has a chance. Belleville has a chance. The Marlies have a chance. Anybody has a chance to finish second in this division. So, yeah, it's really any of these coaches, I would say, in the Canadian division at the AHL level, I think all their jobs are safe because this year has been just such a unique monster that, why would you want to go with a coaching change after something like this, unless your team is just super horrendous, a la Binghamton or Bridgeport, or, well, yeah, those are the two that come to mind. But yeah,
like,
I mean,
my first thought was, I guess if Belleville was like, a 2-win team this year, I'd have to go back into the, archives of what they looked like in previous seasons. Cause at this point it's all a blur. So then I guess maybe you could look at getting rid of Troy Mann, but that's not what's happened this year. I think that he's done a pretty good job turning what has not been a very talented team into a surprisingly resilient one that has managed to sneak in games and play ugly. But yeah, I even with those two that you mentioned, Bridgeport and Binghamton, I don't think that they have been particularly well coached this year. But then again, there have been a lot of goofy circumstances this year, and I'm willing to let them ride another year.
Yeah,
but that's. I feel like we've tackled that question pretty fully now. So
sure, absolutely.
Any closing thoughts here, Paige, going forward for Stockton?
I would say keep an eye on goaltending. We keep getting little hints that Tyler Parsons may be making a start here pretty quick. So maybe in the next 5 games, we actually see him. He's gotten through. He was on the bench on Saturday, so that's exciting to see. One of my buddies from Kansas City, so hopefully he makes it in the net there. I think that would be that'd be interesting to see. Haven't seen him play in a couple of years, so hopefully he's kind of worked out some of his injuries and everything, and he's able to kind of get back in there because some of these guys are up for contracts too. So you're hoping that they can kind of have a little final push at the end to kind of get an extension there. So I would like to see him in net. I guess there are some recent signings from the Flames as well. Some of these guys are going through quarantine as well. So there might be a few lineup changes in the next few games. But other than that, hoping for some better results down the stretch. So we'll see how these games go against Manitoba.
Paige Siewert, covering the Stockton Heat of Calgary for Full Press Hockey. Paige, you also write about the Calgary Flames for another site. Where can people find your work there?
That's on Puck Pro. So they're a subcategory of fan-sided. You can find my stuff in the Calgary Flames section. Also Full Press, doing Stockton stuff there. So you can find me in the AHL section. And then on Twitter at Flames_update is where I'll be.
All righty. Hey, over half an hour. Not a bad conversation with you, Paige. Always nice to have you on. Always nice to talk Stockton, talk Calgary prospects with you, and just talk with you. So thanks for coming on the Calder Farmstead once again. And of course, the door is always open. You're always welcome back.
Perfect. I will be back.
Excellent. Call you Arnold Paige Siewert Schwarzenegger. She'll be back. All right. Well, have a good night, Paige. Thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, guys.
All righty. Paige Siewert, Full Press Hockey. Gotta love that AHL coverage from FPH for sure. Okay. Well, we go from our second guest of the show to our third and final guest. We're bringing him back to talk about the San Jose Barracuda. And boy, were all of us wrong about this series. Man.
Some of us more than others.
Some of us more than others, but I wasn't going to say anything. You said that, not me. But hey, we've got to take a little bit of a break because we talked for 35 minutes with Paige, and we got to get to the sponsors. So Give us a moment for an ad break. We'll get Kevin Lacy on the show to talk about the San Jose Barracuda against the Texas Stars from the weekend that was. All right. Thank you once again to Paige Siewert for coming back on the program and filling in Murray Pam's stead to talk about the Stockton Heat side of the Belleville and Stockton Heat game that occurred this past weekend. Last but definitely not least, we're going to talk about San Jose and Texas. And like we mentioned earlier, boy, were we wrong. Some more wrong than others, unfortunately, but I digress. But before we can talk about the Barracuda, we previewed the weekend. We had him on. It's only fair that we recap the weekend. We have him on. He is the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be when it comes to San Jose Barracuda coverage from Teal Town, USA. We welcome Kevin the Hitman Lacy.
Well, you know what? Let me put these glasses on a fan right here. There you go, little boy. All right. I am the best. Well, actually, it all goes downhill from here, guys, because but thank you for the intro, nevertheless.
Of course. Kevin channeling his inner Bret Hart. I just want him to like pop through up to Sean's screen and just slap the sharpshooter on him and just, maybe hit him with a steel chair so he's bleeding like Stone Cold Steve Austin in WrestleMania 13. Sorry, we're getting off track.
Yep. I do have a foam Undertaker urn from the first show I ever went to, so maybe I'll bring that out another time for the wrestling fans out there.
Only if you dress up as Paul Bearer.
Oh, yes!
Oh, Kane!
Actually, that was me watching these two games between San Jose and Texas on AHL TV. For one, no interruptions, so that makes 4 games in a row that the AHL TV feed didn't die. 2, these games were both at SAP Center, which meant not the best camera work, but no terrible camera work like what we saw at Solar for America Ice with the practice facility, where half the feed was the game was going on and the camera was pointed the other way. So it was much easier to watch these 2 games. So just for that perspective, that gets an "oh yes" from me.
Well said. Well done.
San Jose won, so I'm happy.
And we were going to get into that. All of our picks were incorrect. And Kevin, you and I picked Texas on Friday, San Jose on Saturday. Sean picked a Texas sweep, and can you blame him? Can you blame him?
I would like to at least explain a little bit.
Sure.
I did not think Colton Point would start both games. Like, this to me was like, oh, this will be a shoulder shield Friday game, and maybe they can squeeze one out Saturday. Yeah, that's not what happened. No.
And even the model picked Texas at 63.2%, which, according to the model, I mean, that's a pretty favorable statistic right there. That's a pretty favorable prediction. So
I have a question for you guys about that. First, I did mention that the model Rick Martel should not be making AHL predictions, and that was obviously true.
Mhm.
But seriously though, I am curious how it devised Texas winning both games, because the Barracuda had like a 40-point percentage higher as far as points percentage goes. The Barracuda going into it was something like 526, and Texas, if I recall, was 481 going into it. So from a points percentage perspective, San Jose was the favorite. But so I'm curious to hear why the model said otherwise.
So in the grand scheme of things, the model basically tries to assemble what is the most likely roster based on games played, and then fills those spots. So it basically finds, all right, on the active roster as listed on AHL.com, which I do my best to pull guys out of when I know for certain they are injured, but those are, very few and far between. It's basically like, I know Trey Fix-Wolansky in Cleveland is injured. I know that Martin Pospisil in Stockton is injured. Like, they will not for sure be playing.
Right.
But like the rest of them, they don't tell us because the AHL is the keeper of dumb secrets.
Yeah.
But in that case, and that's also why San Jose gives them so many problems, is because San Jose's roster is a circus.
Fluid.
Yeah, it It is waxing
The
and
Barracuda
waning.
are in the ocean, and it's just wave after
Yep.
wave after
So
wave.
there is that. In terms of goaltending, it picks a starting goaltender based on weight of games played. So, like in Manitoba's case, it's pretty good at it because it thinks that Burden is going to start the majority of the games played because, well, he does. So, like, it weighs the probability that he is going to get the start based on the starts he's gotten in the past going forward. But when you have a team like Texas, or in San Jose's case, like San Jose, it's basically dealer's choice of whatever goalie is going to play in that game, because there really is no pattern or rhyme or reason to it. It's just kind of last minute names out of a hat. So, like, the fact that Scholl and Scheel look like a much better starting goaltenders than Point doesn't really come into fruition because they get kind of weighed somewhat equally. So that's why you get to see a lot of things are favored in Texas's way that are kind of systematic to the model that normally would work well, but without me literally going in there and doing like daily updates and rosters for all of it, which is way more time intensive than anybody got time for. Yeah. That's kind of how we came to this conclusion, and one that like usually works well for most teams and most seasons, but like San Jose's, wild roster selection, goaltenders at random here, because they all kind of timeshare this as opposed to a more balanced starting system, leads us in this direction. It also weighs players based on, past results too. And at least like it doesn't weigh hot and cold streaks. Like the fact that Cole Schneider has not played well recently doesn't weigh into the fact that he has a good record, career wise and earlier in the season. And that kind of balances it out. Whereas from a hot and cold perspective, that's maybe not a great thing. In the future, I'd love to have some kind of way to weigh that better, but we're already getting into technical jargon land, and that's not what we're here for.
I still appreciate that. So thanks for that explanation.
It's a completely valid question. And I hope everyone's not asleep listening to it already. But let's get into the on ice product here a little bit. Cece, I know that I mentioned this on the preview of whose depth shows up first. So this really was going to be kind of whose depth is it anyway? Right. And the answer turned out to be yes. The answer is yes. Both teams really got good contributions from their second and third lines. Both certainly got good play from their top lines. Maybe less true of Alexander True on Saturday, as he was a little more buying a ticket to get to the game than active participant. But the depth came through on both sides when their top players just, couldn't get one to go in. And that certainly was not from lack of trying. I believe there was one moment with Adam Masherin on an island in front where he could basically just, have a little miniature one-on-one with the goalie and couldn't bury it.
Kevin, what did you notice about the Barracuda's depth from this weekend?
It really showed up in both games, and talking about, we kind of led to it in the series preview, or at least the midway point of the series there, because I had pointed out that the line of Chekhovich, Letunov, and Weinger had really found a lot of chemistry, and we did see Evan Weinger scored the tying goal on Friday night, a crucial play. Letunov was out there, and Ivan Chekhovich scored the lead goal, the eventual game winner on Saturday. Both games were really interesting for starters, but in terms of the depth, I think that Brandon Coe, Scott Reedy, and Jake McGrew have a good thing going right now, and Scott Reedy scored in both games. He's a player that I mentioned in the last show, but didn't really get into too much. I thought Scott Reedy was the best player for San Jose in those two games, and it's a crime that he wasn't even one of the 3 stars on the Saturday game, because I thought he was easily the best player on the ice. But even Leon Bergman, who had no goals going into Friday night's game, that was 0 for 22, a player who started the last season on the Sharks roster, opening night roster, and yet scoreless in 22 games. It took him scoring from on his back in order to get a goal, bouncing it off of Colton Point on Friday. But hey, Bergman has had 2 points on Friday, a point on Saturday, and maybe he's starting to turn it around. And even Steen Pashnuk, of course, we all expected Steen Pashnuk, who had 6 career NCAA goals and only 1 in his senior year. Of course, he'd score on Friday and score on Saturday, because we all saw that coming.
because of course.
Yeah. So the depth, you're not kidding when you say the depth really showed up. I'm very happy. I'm sure Roy Sommer is a lot happier than I am, but I'm very happy with the performance of the team these last 2 games.
Yeah, and you had Melnichuk start both games for San Jose too. We'll get to that here in a little bit, but yeah, let's talk Friday night. This looked like a close game from the box score. Was it in reality, or was this another case of the box score committing a sin and lying to us? Sean, why don't you go first, bud?
Oh, sins were had on Friday night, but Texas committed the cardinal sin of hockey. You know, you can make a lot of mistakes over the course of a hockey game, but if you defend that high danger area immediately in front of your net well, and keep teams from getting shots from there, you can pull out a win more times than not, even if you're screwing up in other areas of the game. Texas didn't only not do that, they capital D, capital N did not do that. They were flat out bad defending the most critical area of the ice. And we've also talked about here and there how important fielding loose pucks off the wall is in hockey. You pick up a puck cleanly off the wall or out of the corner under pressure, turn it up ice and get going. That's an often overlooked skill by fans and reporters, but scouts and hockey ops absolutely recognize that. How do I know that it's important? Watch that Scott Reedy goal again and tell me if Thomas Hartley doesn't field that puck under pressure off the half wall cleanly and start the breakout, Friday night's game doesn't go differently. And that's not to slight Thomas Hartley as a player here. He's been the only defenseman in Texas to do a damn thing offensively this year. But the execution of plays like that are what separate AHL guys from NHL guys, are those first moments with the puck. They matter a lot in how the success of the ensuing play goes. You field it cleanly, that play is probably going to go smoothly. You're going to get up ice and make things happen. You bob it a little bit, suddenly you're under pressure, and that's the first step in a 3-step process of a turnover goal happening. But I think Friday it was pretty clear that San Jose was the better team. Their goals weren't maybe SportsCenter top 10 plays, but Texas was 2 good bounces off the back wall away from losing Friday night 4-1, and I think that says a lot.
And to kind of add on to what you're saying there, I completely agree. But on the same note, Texas was actually leading going into the third period there. Or no, they weren't. They had the lead in the third period. I misspoke there. They had the lead in the third period. So credit to San Jose. Of course, I'm pat my own back, I guess, right? But credit to San Jose for coming back and you know, I'm glad that you feel that San Jose was the better team, and eventually that proved to be correct. I think it was a moderately close game. I think that both teams still have vast improvement if you're going to be talking about contending for the Calder Cup or anything like that. Like they're both a ways away from that. So both teams are going to make mistakes. The same mistakes that you talked about Texas having in their own defensive. And I feel like San Jose has shown signs of that as well. Like Josh Melnick had 2 goals where he was left wide open for both of them on Friday. And even the Saturday game where Joe Ciccone, just as unlikely of a goal scorer as Steen Pashnuk, Joe Ciccone somehow walks in, kind of trods in from the blue line and finds himself wide open to the side of the net to score his goal. So both teams defensively have some work, but I think in terms of entertainment value, I think both games were very enjoyable. And you are right. The better team won both games, and I'm happy to say that was San Jose. So.
Yeah, and I guess I don't want to try and make it sound like San Jose dominated. It was there was not a one-sided ass beating in either game really, but I definitely felt like seeing Friday that San Jose was the better team. Like it was close, sure. But if moneypuck.com runs this really cool tool that's called the Deserve to Win a meter, and it's basically they take all of the shots and scoring chances, and they take goaltending out of the equation and give both teams average goaltenders. And then they sim that game with the same shots on goal chances 1,000 times and basically see, like, based on just offense and taking goaltending out of the equation, which team deserved to win the game. And it's a really good metric to kind of see, like, all right, hockey has a lot of randomness and goofy luck to it. If you don't believe me, go watch the Toronto Maple Leafs Vancouver Canucks game from last night. But like it gives you a good impression of who really was the better team that night. And some nights it's really obvious. You don't even need to see the meter, but it definitely gives you kind of a grounded idea. And I think in that, if that meter should be something that I could create for the AHL, which I can't, I think that would have definitely given San Jose a pretty substantial edge in the who deserved to win category.
And let me ask you guys this, because Colton Point, I know you guys talked about it on the last episode. Colton Point, definitely the least desired goalie of the three, seemingly going into these two games, started both games, as you mentioned. Colton Point was pulled after only 2 goals against on Friday. Do you think that's a sign of Colton Point's play, just having the short leash? Or do you think that was Neil Graham giving his team a wake-up call? Because while Texas was leading at one point in the game, as you said, they weren't playing all that well. Do you think that was more of a wake-up call to the team or the goalie?
May I? Yeah, thank you. Having covered Neil Graham for 2 years in Idaho when he coached the Steelheads there, having witnessed him the past couple seasons with the Texas Stars, the man is very particular about his goaltenders sometimes. I've seen him pull Steelheads goalie Ryan Farragher after he let in 2 goals on 3 shots. I've seen him put Farragher back in the second period after that. He did it again with Landon Bowe. Landon Bowe was having a rough go at it, so he pulled him. And Thomas Scholl played like 6 minutes or 4 minutes or something ridiculous like that to round out the first period. And then he puts Bowe back in for the rest of the game. And post game, he tells me it wasn't Bowe's fault. It was the defense in front of him. But with Colton Point, Sean and I have talked about this for a number of episodes now. I saw him in Idaho. He has these, ups and downs, and he's trying to get it right. And I think Dallas doesn't want to give up on him as a prospect or anything, but Neil Graham, if he will not hesitate, if he knows that pulling the goaltender will send a message to not the goalie per se, but the defense, obviously you're going to send a message to the goalie sometimes, but if you don't have a vote of confidence for your defense, which Neil Graham sometimes doesn't, he'll pull the goalie. He'll say, get your act together. And then sometimes he'll put the goalie back in. Now, he didn't do that against the Barracuda, but Neil Graham is kind of an enigma about his goaltenders. He's, like I said, particular is the best word I can use, but sometimes he can get a little weird and unorthodox, I think is a better word for it in regards to when he pulls his goaltender and sometimes if he brings him back in.
And I would say it was definitely more of a sending the message thing, because I felt like if he was going to, say that he had lost confidence in Colton Point, not just from more than a bad start, he wouldn't have put him in Saturday. Like Thomas Scholl made the trip. He was in San Jose. Or if he wasn't, he has quite the Instagram ghost that is following the team because he was in the building.
It was him and Point on the 17th that are on the stat sheet there.
Yeah. So Thomas Scholl was there. Mm-hmm. Shield obviously was there. Probably. I can't imagine he got hurt in the last half of Friday's game. So he clearly had options that were not Colton Point for Saturday, and yet somehow still chose Colton Point. And I agree with Cece. You should not be giving up on him as a prospect. He's 22?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. He's still a young kid with lots of room to grow. And no offense to the patron saint of this podcast, Thomas Scholl, blessed be his name. He's no longer in that age range of spring chicken prospects.
Right.
So he probably, for Texas, that Thomas Scholl has found money. Whereas Colton Point is someone you want to work on and improve, as well as Shield. But I can't imagine, for me, I think it's a mistake to have put him in Saturday. It was pretty clear Friday night to me. And I have a very short leash mentally for goaltenders. I think of goaltenders more like starting pitchers in that sense, where if a starting pitcher pitches an inning and a half of garbage, that manager is coming out to the mound and being like, you have half an inning to get this right. And if you ain't, figured it out by the top of the third, and they'll say in the post-game press conference, he said I didn't have it that night and he was right. And it doesn't seem to bruise their ego or whatever. Whereas goaltenders, that's not the case. Like you can't pull guys like that constantly and have them feel good about themselves. And for me, like my perspective is, look, you're not going to have it every night. The best goaltenders in the NHL, their quality start percentage is, if it's 70, that's otherworldly. That means 30% of the time you didn't have it that night, and that's okay. But like, I don't understand why we're letting games get out of hand before we're yanking goalies. Like, I like Neil Graham's move there to pull him after 2 goals. Were they necessarily Colton Point's fault for sure? Not really, but like sending a message to your team, shaking up the energy, or if nothing else, just getting a guy out of the game who clearly didn't have it that night before the game is over.
Right.
Like, if you're getting to goal number 5 against you, unless you have 4 or 3, that game's pretty much over. You're not making a 3-goal heroic stand more than 2% of the time. So like, I have a short leash there. I never put Colton Point in Saturday's game ever. I think of all, like, I understand being particular with your goalies, and Neil Graham is certainly, a more accomplished hockey coach than I will ever be. But I think that was a mistake to put Colton Point in there. And if it were me, I would be putting Scheel in more. I would be putting Scholl in more. I would be sending Colton Point back to Allen or Idaho. The ECHL is not playing me. Yeah. Like, I would be trying to do something with him, maybe give him a rotational start here and there. But like, it doesn't seem like Colton Point has it consistently this season. And with it being pretty much, the end of the road here, like, it doesn't make sense to me to trot him out there to maybe get hurt in a season that's lost, where he doesn't look good. Like, let him, have pucks in practice, maybe get a one-off start here and there. But like, there should be Scholl and Shields net going forward. And I don't think that's that controversial hot takey of me.
Yeah, I think Adam Scheel played pretty well in the first 2 games against San Jose. Split those, obviously, but I thought he played a strong game. I heard of him, but I had never seen him until those games. And then to come back in a tie game, I mean, he takes the loss on Friday, but I thought he was fine in all 3 games. If anything, like you guys said, I would have expected Scholl to play on the Saturday game, just for the fact that would have essentially been 3.5 games in 5 nights for Scheel. So that part of it, I can understand why Scheel didn't play on Saturday, but it also could be a call where the Dallas Stars said, we want Colton Point to play in this game, and please put him in. You never know.
I mean,
I feel like for a game by game, they're probably going to butt out, but you never know.
I would absolutely bet money that the Stars are telling Neil Graham that they want Colton Point to get games in, and that's fine. Like, but he's also done that. Like, Colton Point has gotten a good share of the games. He's gotten at least half the games played of the team this year. Like, I think, I mean, they have 6 games, 7 games left. And they don't have too many left down the road here. Giving him, 30% of those starts, I don't think is really going to ruffle the feathers of the Stars too much. Like, I'm not saying you bench him, but I definitely think he should be not playing back-to-back nights going forward, especially when he looked that bad on Friday. And I mean, I don't think those goals were his fault, but he definitely looked like he did not have it, if that makes sense.
Well, and to kind of conclude here, Point is on the last year of his ELC. Like, he is on the last year of his entry-level contract. So, of course, the Stars probably want to give him some show-me games. Give him some games saying, should we keep you around for next year? Should we go with Landon Bow next year? Should we keep Scholl around? I know you're kind of rolling your eyes and everything, but, I mean, and Scheel just signed his ELC. And Scholl, like you said, Scholl has found money. Like, Scholl is the SPHL goaltender that came up to the ECHL and went undefeated in the month of March with Adirondack and Idaho, and won goaltender of the month in his first month in the league, mid-season, right before the playoffs. So, Sean, what were you going to say? And we'll talk about Saturday's game a little more holistically.
Yeah. I just want to say, like, yes, it's the last year of his ELC and they want to give him show me games, but like, you've had the dude on your roster and in your system for 3 years. Are you really about to be influenced by 4 games at the end of the season? And because, like, if you say yes to that, that's bad management of your roster. Like, what he should do, or what he's going to show you in like these, if he pitches 4 shutouts that are 50 saves apiece, okay, maybe we can talk then. But like, there is really nothing realistic that Colton Point can do in the last week or so of games that are going to happen. And I mean, like, there's a month left on the calendar, but like, he's going to get maybe 5 or 6 more starts here. But in those 5-6 starts, like, nothing he's going to do is going to change my overall impression of him as a prospect if I'm Dallas. Like, not to mention too, yes, Thomas Scholl has found money, but Jake Ottinger looks like he's going to work out. Yes, you want Colton Point to start because the more, irons you have in the fire, especially with as voodoo-y as goaltenders are, the better. But like, I really don't think that this is that big an issue to them to be pressing to Colton Point into action over a guy like Shield, who is someone who is mostly unknown to that franchise in terms of his ability at the professional level. And Thomas Scholl, I don't think it's in the cards for him to be an NHL starting goaltender, despite the fact that I think he is a pretty good goaltender. I think this is the peak for him in his talent level. And that's not a knock on him. The AHL is still a very good league. But should he pan out to be, a goaltender at the age of 28 to get NHL starts and be useful, like, that's not unheard of either. I feel like at this point you have to kind of pick a lane. And what more are you hoping to see from Colton Point that you haven't seen in the past 3 years? Whereas these other two are goaltenders that, Thomas Scholl was in your organization in Idaho, but like, if you would have told me that the professional scouting department in Dallas 100% knew who Thomas Scholl was to a man, I would bet against that with quite a substantial wager. Like, they might have known who he was, but they weren't watching film on him. Whereas this year, like I said, found money. But that's an opportunity for them to see if what they might have from him more so than what they have from Point.
Sorry to go off on the Dallas goaltenders there real quick, Kevin. But yeah, let's talk about Saturday's game. We'll conclude and wrap up a little bit here. The Stars committing the cardinal sin in hockey on Friday, Sean. Did they atone for those sins on Saturday?
Nope. Defense, once again, just sinning away. At least one goal, I think, is more on their man-to-man scheme, as Jared Rosberg kind of abandoned the front of the net so Pasenchuk could just walk in and score. Bergman was in the front of the net there, and from my reading of it, that was Rosberg's mark. That was his man in the man-to-man scheme. So he turned his back to the play to make sure he had his mark covered. Like, that's not ideal, but I at least understand how that play unfolded. And I think that kind of nuance of man-to-man coverage in that situation might have left a lot of fans like, why did you just literally skate away from, like, that was how I saw it. This, Texas plays a man-to-man with a puck above the dots. That's kind of how the game, how it unfolded. And as someone who's played defense in a man-to-man scheme, like, there are definitely times in which it's appropriate to turn your back on the play to cover your guy. I don't necessarily know that exact moment was a good example of that, but I at least understand how that was a defendable position if, you have to go to video review court in Texas's locker room after the game.
And I know we talked about, we already talked about Point and, how you didn't really agree with him starting Saturday's game. But Kevin, let's go to the other side of the coin on Saturday once again, just to kind of, again, to wrap up and to conclude here. Your closing thoughts on the Saturday game from the Barracuda side.
Well, Alexei Melnichuk, since we're talking about the goalies quite a bit, Alexei Melnichuk did play in both games.
Yes.
I still expect him to get the majority of the starts for the Barracuda for the rest of the season. Sam Harvey might get a game in here or there. He did play, I forget which game it was, but I believe it was the Wednesday win. But for the most part, you're going to be seeing Melnichuk play out the season, with Josef Kozhinash occasionally being sent down to get a game in, although Kozhinash is getting plenty of NHL action right now, but that's a whole other story. But Melnichuk, I think, is starting to come around. Obviously, being platooned between the taxi squad and the starting role for the CUDA, it doesn't help with consistency issues. And for a player who is, or at least the first couple of months here, still looking to get adjusted to North American ice, I think in these past 3 starts that he's made for San Jose, he looks like he's starting to understand his angles. He still has a lot of work to improve. So I've been getting a lot of questions on Twitter lately about, like, because of how bad the Sharks goaltending has been, is it time for Melnichuk to step up? And I would say absolutely not. I mean, ideally, Kozhinash would not be there either. But with Melnichuk, he looks like he's starting to get comfortable. I noticed that he was starting to shove defensemen out of the crease, or opposing forwards, I should say, out of the crease, and starting to just look like, rather than be a goalie who's standing there just waiting for the puck to hit him and trying to figure out, like, okay, is this okay to do? Is this okay? Okay, yeah, I'm going to stick my glove out here. He looks like he's starting to come into form a little bit, and I think that having the consistent playing time is a big part of that. Can he continue this from a San Jose standpoint? We hope so. He had a phenomenal start against San Diego about 6 weeks ago, where it was like, oh boy, okay, now we see the ceiling of this kid. So outside of that game, I don't know if San Jose, I don't know if San Jose has really seen much more out of that. But I think that the bad games, or the bad moments for Melnichuk, are starting to fade away a little bit. And so hopefully he will continue to progress here the more starts he gets. As far as the game itself goes, again, I thought it was an entertaining game. The Barracuda, I thought, carried the play. I don't know if carried the play is the right word, but they were the better team. I felt like in the first period. They started out completely flat in the second period. Texas came out playing well, but I almost feel like it was more that San Jose was just flat out bad the first 5 to 7-ish minutes. Gave up the 2 goals. Again, I mentioned Joe Ciccone somehow found himself wide open. But on the flip side, then you get Scott Reedy getting the CUDA back on the board, and then right after that, Steen Pashnuk, another one. You talked about the play there with Jared Rosberg. Why is Steen Pashnuk allowed to walk right into the net from the corner? No idea, but I guess that's the flip side of the Ciccone goal. And then again, right after that, Ivan Chikovic with a laser to the top corner past Colton Point's glove. That was 3 goals in 1 minute and 18 seconds. And suddenly it went from San Jose being completely flat to San Jose controlling the rest of the game.
Yeah. And I think, we brought this up a while ago when we were talking about Syracuse and my absolute despise for man-to-man defense. Because like you said, how does he end up walking in front? I'm like, off the top of my head, I don't remember exactly. I remember what I saw in the front of the net, but like all it takes for a man-to-man defense to break down is one guy to slip off his man. That's it. Yep. You get one good pivot off a guy from the corner coming out, and exactly what happens with that goal is what happens. Like, that's why I hate man-to-man defense, because all you have to do is one guy has to beat one other guy to the net front, and then it's it. It's a high danger chance. So from memory, I don't remember if it was the guy who was supposed to be covering him just kind of read the play wrong and he got free. I remember them going up the boards and then him coming out of the corner. So that's possible. Yep. But that's likely where a breakdown happens, is somebody thought their guy was going one direction. The puck bounces to him going the other way, and suddenly you look very stupid for what is just a bad bounce and you're against you. Yeah,
it looked like 2 Stars players skated up along the board side, and whoever, Zach Gallant, I'm looking at the box sheet, Zach Gallant chipped it right in behind both of them to Pashnuk, and then Pashnuk was able to just skate right in. Couldn't have been easier for him. I don't think he'll, especially considering that scored 1 goal last year in NCAA. I can't imagine he's going to get many more pro goals that easy, but good for him. He's now outscoring his brother Brinson. Who would have thought?
Well, hey, I think it's fitting, since Kevin, once we say goodbye to you, we're going to, of course, tackle our cream of the crop, our best AHL individual players that Sean and I pick. So if I may see you off here and say, the man of the hour, too sweet to be sour, funky like a monkey, and the sky's the limit. Yeah, Kevin Lacy, the hitman. Put him in the sharpshooter. Oh, yeah.
Love it.
You,
I love it, man.
Can't wait to go to the Survivor
Ooh,
Series.
Survivor Series. Yeah, you got Bret Hart. You got the Stone Cold Steve Austin. Oh, man. Owen Hart, he's the wild card. I tell you, he's the wild card. You got to be careful. There's that bad blood between both Bret and Stone Cold. Watch out, man. Oh, that's intense. Cup of
All
coffee.
right, save your voice. Save your voice. We got a
Okay,
whole other
okay.
segment we need that for.
Kevin,
Thanks for having me, guys. Always a pleasure.
thank you, man.
I'm at Kevin Lacy 22, and I occasionally do a podcast called In the Reef about the San Jose Barracuda on the Teal Town USA network. So be sure to check that out. I recorded one a week ago, and it got garbled up by the Infinity Stone or something. I don't know, but I'm gonna get a new one recorded here soon, so check that out. And again, I'm Kevin Lacy, so thanks for having me, everybody.
Thanks
for coming
again,
on.
Kev. We'll see you next time. Yeah, I'm gonna need some tea after that before we go into cream of the crop. That's for
So
sure.
let's head to break here while Cece has his voice recover, and we can wrap the show up here in a little bit. We have cream of the crop and the quiz coming up, and we will see how that goes for Cece. So stick with us. We got some ads for some bills to pay. We'll be right back.
We are on the home stretch of episode number 30. And we've only got a couple segments left, but we're done with our opening segment with the reporter who broke the Binghamton story. And we definitely want to thank Nicole Menner for coming on the show once again. And we had Paige Siewert to talk about Belleville and Stockton, and we had Kevin Lacy to talk about San Jose and Texas. By God, we had a packed show, and now we're just wrapping it up. So, second to last segment here. It's time. Careful if you're lactose intolerant. You've been warned, because the cream always rises to the top. Yeah, you can feel it. You can feel the madness. Oh yeah, the cream of the crop, the best in the individual NHL players or AHL players, not NHL. Because we're an AHL podcast. So yes, Sean and I both have 3 picks each. So, Sean, who do you have for your third cream of the crop? Yeah.
I have Jonas Ronbjerg from the Henderson Silver Knights. Goal, 2 assists for a 3-point weekend. He tries to jumpstart the HSK comeback on Friday. Scores the game-time goal on Saturday. Played a pretty good overall game. I'm going to go Jonas Ronbjerg for my third cream of the crop of the weekend.
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you a little something about A.J. Greer. Traded to the New Jersey Devils organization. I almost said New York Rangers. I knew that wasn't right. But let me tell you, 2 points in 10 games with Bridgeport this season. You trade him to New Jersey. Now he's got 3 points in 3 games, including a goal and an assist from this past weekend. He even helped Binghamton get by Wilkes-Barre Scranton and exercise some demons. 6-3, I believe that was the final score. A.J. Greer, my third cream of the crop. Oh, yeah.
Your turn.
My second is one who's been here before, Ryan McLeod from the Kingslayer. 2 goals and an assist for 3 points. He played 2 games this weekend, but those he was off the score sheet in the first one as it was a 1-0 kind of a low event affair, but scored the game opener Saturday night, played a great game overall. Plus, got a call up to Edmonton. So even the Oilers recognize him as one of the best in the AHL for the weekend. Kudos to him. Congrats on the call up, especially because he's going all the way to Canada across the border.
Yeah.
I think that will be the last we see of the kid line for the year. I have no idea if they can find a 21-year-old in time to plug in at center on that line to, keep the moniker going. But here's hoping.
Right. Here's hoping. My second cream of the crop, I'm going to not channel the Macho Man Randy Savage because it is late and my voice says no. So, Otto Sompi from the Syracuse Crunch. Now, his teammate Taylor Radish may have won the CCM AHL Player of the Week award, but Sompy went off on Saturday against Wilkes-Barre Scranton, notching 2 goals and 2 assists for a 4-point night. And hell, if you include Monday and you want to clump that into the weekend, as it were, he chipped in another 2 goals against Utica while we were recording, and that game has gone final 6-2 Syracuse over Utica and Otto Sompy. My second
Cream of the crop. Oh yeah.
All right, my top for my number one cream of the crop here. We're going Ken Appleby.
Okay.
The Bridgeport Sound Tigers. 22 save shutout against Hartford on Saturday. Admittedly, not the hardest workload per se, but they don't ask how, they ask how many. It's been a rough season for the Sound Tigers, and a shutout win absolutely earns them love. Ken Appleby, cream of the crop.
And you mentioned that 1-0 low event affair that Bakersfield had against Ontario this weekend. My first cream of the crop, and it may be a little unorthodox, but Olivier Rodriguez, the 30 saves on 30 shots in net against Ontario this past Friday. Now, he struggled in goal for the Condors this season, but you cannot take away his first professional shutout in that 1-0 Baco victory over Ontario. Olivier Rodriguez, my first cream of the crop.
You want to feel the madness? You got to get Miss Elizabeth to congratulate Olivier. Oh, yeah, that's the cream of the crop. We're done. We're donezo. Nothing's going to stop me. Oh, yeah, nothing means nothing.
All right.
Well, we've been talking affiliations and how they switch on this show, and when it comes time for the quiz, we have a mechanism to kind of harness that chaotic energy.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the Affiliation Shuffle. So for those of you who do not remember this from a long time ago, it feels like we played this in the preseason or the off-season signings recap way back when our show was a different name under a different company. But the Affiliation Shuffle works like this. I'm going to give the CC an AHL franchise and give him either 3 ECHL teams or 3 NHL teams. And he has to tell me which team that AHL franchise was never affiliated with. So of the 3 choices, 2 of them have been affiliated with that franchise, not necessarily that specific team, but that franchise. Mm-hmm. So league history plays a factor into this. So CC, we have 5 questions here. You need 3 to score the W, get some FaceTime, and lead the outro. First up, your team from the AHL is the Syracuse Crunch. Of these NHL teams, which were they never affiliated with? A, the Vancouver Canucks, B, the Pittsburgh Penguins, or C, the Buffalo Sabres?
I'm going to say C, the Buffalo Sabres. Final answer.
That is correct. Being affiliated with the Vancouver Canucks in Syracuse, quite a thing. But no, surprisingly, one of their nearest NHL clubs, never been an affiliate of in their history. Second up, we're going ECHL here. Your AHL franchise is the Rochester Americans.
Okay.
Have they? Which one of these 3 have they never been affiliated with? Is it the Reading Royals, the Bossier Shreveport Mudbugs, or the Florida Everblades?
I'm going to say the Florida Everblades.
I'm sorry, CC. We were looking for Reading Royals.
Ouch.
1 for 2. All right. Should be a good comeback one for you here. We're going back to the NHL, and we're looking at the Grand Rapids Griffins.
Okay.
Which of these 3 have they never been affiliated with? A, the Detroit Red Wings, B, the Chicago Blackhawks, or C, the Ottawa Senators?
I'm going to say B, the Chicago Blackhawks.
You are back on the board. Blackhawks is correct.
Yeah.
They were affiliated with the Ottawa Senators for 1 year, their very first.
Wow.
And ever since then, Red Wings all the way. All right. Kicking back to the ECHL, and we're looking at the Chicago Wolves ECHL affiliates here. Which one of these 3 have they never been affiliated with? Is it A, the Kalamazoo Wings, B, the Indy Fuel, or C, the Gwinnett Gladiators?
I'm going to say B, the Indy Fuel. Final answer.
Congratulations, Cece. You are the victor. That is correct. That gives you 3. Cece, you have 30 untimed seconds of make-believe. What is on your mind?
Well, per usual, I don't have anything planned for this, but as I've kind of dropped a few times this episode, I did make a trip to Indianapolis, Indiana this past weekend to cover the Indy Fuel versus the Fort Wayne Comets. And if you're wondering why in the hell was I covering an ECHL game when my normal beat is the Colorado Eagles? So if I were to cover an ECHL game, it'd probably be their affiliate, their ECHL affiliate, the Utah Grizzlies. Well, let me tell you a little something. Kristen Bassnett has been my friend since I joined the Sinbin back in October 2017. I was there for 3 years, as many of you know, before I came to Full Press Hockey in January 2021. Now, Kristen was the Manchester Monarchs photographer for a number of years before that team unfortunately folded after the 2019 postseason exit that they made, which I also referenced at the beginning of the show. But yes, so Kristen went to the Maine Mariners and she shot for them, even though she was an hour and a half away from them. She shot 2 or 3 times a month, compiled some photo galleries for them. And then this season happened. The ECHL North Division completely ceased for the year. So Kristen was left without a hockey team to shoot. So we did a little brainstorming. Like I said, Kristen's a friend of mine. She ended up coming over to Full Press Hockey. We tried getting her AHL credentials to a couple teams. They were still figuring things out in the beginning of the season. And, well, yeah, 405 days Kristen went without shooting a pro hockey game until this weekend. And so I covered her. I wanted to tell her story and basically show, I know a lot of photographers have been in that position. I know a lot of sports journalists in general have been in that position, but I feel like Kristen's story was a story that needed to be told. And for her to travel to Indy, where the former coach of the Manchester Monarchs, Doug Christensen, and a few former Manch players and a few former Maine players were on the ice for that game, I felt like it was a special moment and hopefully one that I can convey well. So long and short of it, I had a really good time this weekend, and I hope that this feature piece is meaningful to you guys as it is to me in seeing a gal who hasn't shot a game in over 13 months finally get to do so, and with players that she has a connection with.
All right. Well, that's it for the show. If you guys are enjoying the show, please make sure you subscribe so you get episodes in a timely fashion. Also, please rate and review the podcast wherever you're listening to it from. If it's a podcatcher that does review things, Spotify and Google don't, but iTunes does, and we'd appreciate an iTunes review. Good or bad, if you're going to give us 5 stars, we'd appreciate that. If you're going to give us 3 stars, I feel like we've earned a pity star and a half. Just, throwing it out there. If you're watching on YouTube, like the video, comment what you thought of the episode. Make sure you click on that subscribe button. Doing so helps others find the show. Your reviews and comments help us improve it. You can also follow the show on social media at Calder Farmstead on Twitter, at the Calder Farmstead on Instagram and Facebook. Links to all of that and more can be found in our link tree, which is scrolling down below here, but is also found for the audio version at linktr.ee/the Calder Farmstead. Cece.
I'm Cece Hockley. The Calder Farmstead is part of the Full Press Radio Network. You can find this program, a lot of other great hockey podcasts, and a lot of other great sports and sports entertainment programming at www.fullpresscoverage.com. Just click on the podcast button. It'll drop down a menu and you'll have all the choices. You can find me personally representing Full Press Hockey on Twitter at FPC_AHL and at my personal Twitter account at CCHawk. That's SEESEEHAWK. 75 to 80% of it's hockey, but hey, you can see me talking about pro wrestling, talking about music, talking about, a variety of other things in the other, 20 to 25%. You can also check out my hockey writing on the Full Press Coverage Network at www.fullpresshockey.com. Like I said, I've got that awesome feature that's the majority of it is written. Got to fine tune it a little bit before we submit it. And Kristen's got to edit those photos because we're going to showcase those a little bit too, of course. Shawnee.
I'm Sean O'Brien. I don't write feature pieces because, fun fact, I don't know how to write. But you can find me on Twitter at Sean O'Brien 81. That's SeanObrien 81. I'm also on an Instagram account that occasionally does stuff. It's not artsy pictures of food, but it is a cute dog occasionally. That's at Sean O'Brien _81. If you're curious about where we're quoting all of these wild, exotic stats like PDO, where we're talking about the model that we developed, it is on my Tableau page at bit.ly/data-dump-and-chase, all lowercase, all one word. Big thanks to Adrian Drake, who made our theme music. You can find him on social media at AD_dysfunction. That's AD_DYSFUNCTION, so he can make music for you too. Also, a big shout out to Cece, who is going to edit this video at 11:52 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So God be with him. Please, Cece, take us home.
Once again, very, very gladly, I will gladly do so. That has been episode number 30 of the Calder Farmstead podcast. For Sean O'Brien, I am Cece Hockley. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for listening. We really appreciate it. And as always, keep your stick on the ice.